Chapter 672. Just as Xiao Chun was about to step into the teleportation array, a shout came from afar. "Xiao Chun, wait a moment." Hearing the voice, Xiao Chun turned around and saw Wang Fong and Wang Zong rushing toward him. They quickly arrived in front of Xiao Chun. Looking at Xiao Chun, Wang Fong wanted to say something but hesitated. After hesitating a few times, she finally mustered up the courage to ask, "Xiao Chun, you will bring junior sister Ling Yao back, right?" Wang Fong also knew about Gu Ling Yao. Hearing this, Xiao Chun took the lead and replied, "Of course." Hearing Xiao Chun's reply, Wang Fong didn't know why, but she felt relieved. Wang Fong really treated Gu Ling Yao as a good friend. Wang Fong didn't say anything else, but Wang Zong smiled and said, "Be careful when you go out to train." This time, Xiao Chun only told the Tianfeng Saint about his trip to the Wind Plains. To the outside world, he announced that he was going out to train. Hearing Wang Zong's reminder, Xiao Chun nodded slightly and said, "Thank you." After saying that, Xiao Chun walked into the teleportation matrix without hesitation. His figure soon disappeared. It wasn't troublesome to go to the Wind Plains from Tianfeng Shenzhou. First, one would arrive at the Tianfeng Prefecture City, where there was a teleportation array that led to the Wind Plains. Of course, this teleportation array didn't lead directly to the Wind Plains, but to the Jinfeng City outside the Wind Plains. The Wind Plains was located in a different area for the Tianfeng Prefecture. According to its geographical location, the Wind Plains should belong to the Tianfeng Prefecture. However, because the Wind Plains was one of the 4 great death zones of the Tiana continent, it was directly managed by the ancient sacred sect. Because of this, the only city outside the branch monastery, Jinfeng City, had nothing to do with Tianfeng Shenzhou. It was directly under the ancient sacred sect. For this reason, the ancient sacred sect had specially sent a saint to guard this place all year round. From this, it could be seen that the ancient sacred sect attached great importance to the Wind Plains. Perhaps it was because of the uniqueness of the Wind Plains and the opportunities that appeared frequently that even though the Wind Plains was dangerous, the wind-suppressing city was extremely lively and prosperous. The scale and prosperity of a city on the edge of the land of death was no less than that of the Tianfeng Prefecture City. This was indeed a shocking matter. However, after thinking about it for a moment, he understood. There were great opportunities and many precious treasures in the Wind Plains. Thus, many people would choose to come to the Wind Plains to train. In addition, this place was under the direct jurisdiction of the ancient sacred sect. Therefore, all the disciples of the other sacred sects in the ancient sacred region would come to the Wind Plains to train. Even the disciples of the ancient sacred sect could be seen in the wind-suppressing city from time to time. The Wind Plains was indeed a mysterious place that people yearned for. One side of it was located in the heavenly Wind Palace, while the other side was connected to the endless ocean. The entire Sky River continent was divided into 4 continents, and each continent could be said to be an independent continent separated by the endless sea. They were distributed around the Sky River continent. Therefore, the Wind Plains was not only located at the end of the heavenly Wind Palace, but also at the end of the ancient sacred region. Through the teleportation formation, Xiao Chun quickly arrived at the Jinshan city. Looking at the bustling city with people coming and going, Xiao Chun keenly discovered that the people in the Jinshan city were a mix of good and bad people. Not only were there local forces, but the disciples of the various sacred sects were also gathered here. When he was passing through the teleportation formation, Xiao Chun knew that the teleportation formation in the Jinshan city was built at a great cost by the ancient sacred sect. It was connected to all the teleportation formations in the ancient sacred sect's territory. In other words, it was not only the heavenly Wind Palace that could be directly sent to the wind-suppressing city through the teleportation formation, but also from any other prefecture city in the ancient sacred region. Because of this convenience, the wind-suppressing city had become a gathering place for the disciples of the various sacred sects in the ancient sacred region. With so many disciples of the sacred sects gathered here, the Jinshan city naturally had its own characteristics. For example, Institutions such as the gladiator arena and the exchange were extremely popular in the Jinshan city. It could be said that the Jinshan city was a place where good and bad people mixed together. However, in addition to the disciples of the various sacred sects, the Jinshan city also had its own local forces, known as the Three Great Clans. It was said that the three great clans had existed since the city was built. There were many experts in the clans. Although there were no saints, there were many half-sages. Their numbers were probably not weaker than that of the Tianfeng Shengzhou. After gradually understanding the situation of the wind-suppressing city, Xiao Chun had to admit that the wind-suppressing city was indeed very different from what he had imagined. As he wandered on the streets, he thought about entering the Wind Plains. As Xiao Chun, it was naturally better to enter the Wind Plains as early as possible. With this thought in mind, Xiao Chun quickly decided that he would only rest in the wind-suppressing city for a day. He would leave for the Wind Plains the next day. After finding an inn and ordering some wine and dishes, Xiao Chun drank alone silently. However, it should not be said that he was alone because there was Xiao Shang beside him. However, the wine today was somewhat tasteless to Xiao Chun. Every time he thought of that little girl, Gu Lingyao, Xiao Chun found it difficult to calm down. He did not know how that little girl was now. Was she in the Sacredine sect? Did the Sacredine sect hurt her? The more he thought about it, the harder it was to control the anger in his heart. However, he knew that he could not change anything right now. He did not have the qualifications to confront the Sacredine sect. After drinking the wine in his cup, Xiao Chun secretly swore, "Just you wait. There will be a day when I will personally go to the Sacredine sect. In Yunluan, you called me an ant. When the time comes, I will definitely let you see who is the real ant." With such a state of mind, Xiao Chun did not cultivate. Accompanied by the wine, he finally fell into a deep sleep. After a silent night, early the next morning, when the sky had just brightened, Xiao Chun checked out of the inn and walked towards the city gate. As soon as he left the inn, Xiao Chun felt that the wind-suppressing city today was somewhat different. How should he put it? The wind-suppressing city today gave people a very oppressive feeling. The faces of the heavy people were somewhat heavy. They gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and whispered about something. Occasionally, they would even sigh. Although he did not know what was going on, Xiao Chun did not pay too much attention to it. He walked all the way to the city gate of wind-suppressing city. However, here, Xiao Chun received a reply that he was not allowed to leave the city. A group of 200 soldiers was responsible for guarding the city gate. The general leading them was a deacon of the ancient sacred sect. He had the cultivation of a half-saint. Hearing the words of the half-saint deacon, Xiao Chun asked doubtfully, "Sir, may I ask why we are suddenly prohibited from leaving the city?" He was in a hurry to go to the Wind Plains. Now that he was not allowed to leave the city, what could he do? Faced with Xiao Chun's question, the deacon did not have any intention of making things difficult for him. He simply replied, "There are signs that the wind ghost in the Wind Plains may launch a large-scale attack on the city. Therefore, everyone is prohibited from leaving the city. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." In a chapter. Chapter 673. The wind ghost in the Wind Plains was showing signs of a large-scale attack, so the entire wind-suppressing city was under martial law. Xiao Chun wasn't familiar with the wind ghost. Fortunately, he had Xiao Shang by his side. According to his explanation, Xiao Chun found out that the wind ghost was a special creature in the Wind Plains. It was similar to a wild beast. It had low intelligence and was even inferior to a monster. However, it was extremely ferocious. Moreover, the wind ghost wasn't afraid of the strong winds in the Wind Plains. It could be said that the Wind Plains was a land of death for humans, but it was the best home for the wind ghost. No one knew when the wind ghost appeared. It seemed that the wind ghost had already existed in the Wind Plains. It was also because of the existence of the wind ghost in the Wind Plains that the ancient sacred sect built the wind-suppressing city here. The purpose was to guard against the wind ghost attacks. Every once in a while, the wind ghost would invade human territory. Their goal was very simple, and that was to devour humans. They loved human flesh and blood very much. In addition, they didn't have high intelligence. Therefore, the wind ghost could be said to be acting on instinct. In this way, it also created their ferocious nature. After telling Xiao Chun about the wind ghost in detail, after hearing Xiao Sheng's explanation, Xiao Chun had no choice but to return to the city. Since there were signs that the wind ghost was about to launch a large-scale attack, Xiao Chun obviously couldn't leave the city at this time. Not to mention that the entire Jinshan city was under martial law. Even if it wasn't, Xiao Chun wouldn't leave the city rashly. One had to know that if one encountered the wind ghost in the wild, there was no chance of survival. Only by relying on the city could one have a chance of survival. Xiao Chun helplessly returned to Heavy City and found a restaurant. He drank while listening to the people around him talk about the wind ghost. Listening to the discussions of the surrounding people, Xiao Chun's understanding of the wind ghost slowly increased. Speaking of which, his luck was pretty good. He actually encountered a wind ghost as soon as he arrived in Wind Suppression City. According to the discussions of the surrounding people, the most recent wind ghost attack seemed to be 20 years ago. Of course, this was referring to large-scale wind ghost attacks. Small-scale wind ghost attacks naturally occurred from time to time, but they were harmless. The only thing that Suppressing Wind City was afraid of was large-scale wind ghost attacks. Every time a large-scale wind ghost attack broke out, it would be a tough battle for Suppressing Wind City. At that time, the number of wind ghosts would not be in the tens of thousands, but in the hundreds of thousands, millions, or even millions of wind ghosts. It was not impossible. It was said that the largest wind ghost attack in history was over 10 million wind ghosts. At that time, all the holy sons of the ancient sacred sect were mobilized, and even 3 Saint Venerable Elders were sent out. The rest of the deacons and disciples were even more numerous. Only then were they able to successfully withstand that attack. Alas, I hope this attack is not too terrifying. Otherwise, Mountain Suppression City will face another bloody battle. One of the 4 people sitting next to Xiao Chun sighed and said. Hearing this, another person also spoke out. Yes, if the scale of this wind ghost attack is too large, I'm afraid the City Lord Mansion will have to issue the Ancient Sacred Order again. The Ancient Sacred Order was an order issued by the Ancient Sacred Sect during special times. Once it was issued, all the cultivators in the Ancient Sacred Sect must obey the order. Otherwise, they would be sentenced to death. Only during special times would the Ancient Sacred Order be issued. The Ancient Sacred Order was divided into 3 levels, from low to high. A Level 1 Ancient Sacred Order only needed 1 saint to sign it. A Level 2 Ancient Sacred Order required more than half of the saints in the Ancient Sacred Sect to sign it. As for the highest level, a Level 3 Ancient Sacred Order, it required all the saints in the Ancient Sacred Sect to sign it. According to the level, it corresponded to the urgency of the situation. In any case, a Level 3 Ancient Sacred Order had never appeared since the establishment of the Ancient Sacred Sect. This was because once a Level 3 Ancient Sacred Order was issued, it represented a moment of life and death. Level 3 and Level 2 Ancient Sacred Order were very rare. However, a Level 1 Ancient Sacred Order could only be issued a few times, especially in Jinshan City. Every time a wind ghost attack of more than 1 million people broke out, the City Lore Mansion of Jinshan City would issue a Level 1 Ancient Sacred Order, ordering all the experts in the city to work together to deal with the wind ghost attack. There was no other way. The City Lord Mansion of Jinshan City had too many experts. Once they faced a large-scale wind ghost attack, it was obviously not enough. Therefore, they could only rely on the cultivators in the city. They prayed that the wind ghost attack this time would not be too terrifying. However, after hearing the words of these 2, another person sitting together with them said with a smile, I say, why are you guys so cowardly? The invasion of the Wind Fiend is a great opportunity for us. You should know that the Wind Fiend has quite a number of good items on him. When the time comes, we can sell them to the Ancient Saint Sect for a sum of spirit stones. Regarding the upcoming wind ghost attack, some people were excited, while some were afraid. Some people felt that the wind ghost attack was a good opportunity to make a fortune. After all, Every time the Jinshan city resisted the wind ghost attack, the ancient sacred sect would reward the cultivators according to their merits. Those who fought bravely would receive a lot of rewards. At the same time, the corpse of the wind ghost you killed could be sold to the ancient sacred sect. In this way, after a wind ghost attack, the powerful cultivators would receive a great harvest. Xiao Chun drank alone in the tavern and listened to the discussions of the people around him. Needless to say, Xiao Chun had indeed heard a lot of useful information from them. The first was the wind ghost, and the second was the ancient sacred token. He had never heard of the ancient sacred token before, but after listening to the discussions of the people around him, Xiao Chun gradually understood. It seems that we can only wait until the wind ghost attack ends before we can enter the wind plane. However, I don't know what the scale of the wind ghost attack will be. However, since the City Lord Mansion has ordered the whole city to be on alert, it seems that the scale of this attack will not be small. After drinking a mouthful of wine, Xiao Chun secretly thought to himself, if it was only a small-scale wind ghost attack, the City Lord Mansion would obviously not be on alert. He could only wait and see in the city. However, the wind ghost attack this time was not all bad news for Xiao Chun. This was because according to past experience, after every wind ghost attack, the wind plane would enter a short period of peace. At that time, the wind ghost and the wind plane would be very obedient. In this way, entering the wind plane during that period of time would naturally be much less dangerous than usual. In this way, when Xiao Chun entered the wind plane at that time, he would not have to worry too much about the wind ghost attack. Just as Xiao Chun was secretly thinking about his decision, the City Lord Mansion of the Jinshan City was shrouded in a tense atmosphere. In the hall of the City Lord Mansion, more than 10 people were sitting together. Everyone's expression was not very good. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 674. There were a total of 17 people sitting in a circle in the main hall of the City Lord's Mansion. The person sitting on the main seat was a middle-aged man. He was tall and sturdy, had a square face, and looked somewhat ferocious. In addition, his expression was somewhat ugly, which made him look even more furious. The middle-aged man was called Saint Kuang Li. He was the saint of the ancient saint sect who was in charge of guarding Jinshan City. As for the dozen people below him, they were all experts of the City Lord's Mansion. Saint Kuang Li's hoarse voice rang out as he glanced at the crowd below with his fist. According to the latest news, the scale of the wind ghost attack has reached at least 2 million. What do you think we should do? Everyone had gathered here because of the wind ghost attack. This time, the scale of the wind ghost attack wasn't small. Facing such a scale of wind ghost attack, suppressing Wind City obviously had to prepare countermeasures in advance. There were as many as 20,000 wind ghosts. This was a great pressure on Jinshan City. Moreover, who knew if the number of wind ghosts would continue to increase when they finally attacked? Everyone fell silent after hearing Saint Kuang Li's words. After a long while, one of the people below Saint Kuang Li spoke. Lord Sacred Master, let's activate the ancient saint token. The City Lord's Mansion alone is not enough to deal with the wind ghost attack of this scale. He proposed to use the ancient saint token. After all, there were only so many people in the City Lord's Mansion. It was impossible to resist the attack of more than 2 million wind ghosts. Therefore, they could only issue the ancient saint token and mobilize everyone in Jinshan City. Only then would they be able to repel the wind ghost attack. Saint Kuang Li nodded slightly and said, "In my name, issue a level 1 ancient saint token. All cultivators in Jinshan City are to be at the disposal of the City Lord's Mansion from now on." Soon, Ancient Saint Token was issued from the City Lord Mansion. Everyone who received the Ancient Saint Token had different expressions. Some were worried, while others were excited. However, there was one thing that was the same. Once the Ancient Saint Order was issued, everyone had to obey it. In other words, all the warriors in the wind-suppressing city had to obey the orders of the City Lord Mansion from now on. Otherwise, the City Lord Mansion had the right to kill them. After the Ancient Saint Order was issued, the entire wind suppression city became noisy. Everyone knew that the scale of the wind ghost attack this time would not be small. Otherwise, why would the City Lord Mansion issue the Ancient Saint Order? Less than an hour after the Ancient Saint Order was issued, the first order from the City Lord Mansion was issued. In Jinshan City, all practitioners whose cultivation had reached the Tao querying realm had to gather at a designated inn before nightfall. There would be deacons from the Ancient Saint sect who would arrange accommodations for everyone. All the martial artists above the Tao querying realm were gathered. As for martial artists below the Tao querying realm, they had nothing to do with them. In the face of the wind ghost attack, martial artists below the Tao querying realm were almost useless. They only had one task, which was to take care of the logistics. As for the battlefield, they were not qualified to participate. Like the others, after receiving the order, Xiaochen also came to one of the inns designated by the City Lord Mansion. This inn had been requisitioned by the City Lord Mansion and was specially provided for Tao querying realm martial artists and above to stay. When Xiao Chun stepped into the hall on the first floor of the inn, a soldier from the City Lord Mansion took the initiative to welcome him. "Friend, please register here." Everyone who came to the inn had to register. Of course, it was very simple. It was nothing more than name, cultivation, and the faction that they belonged to. After this simple registration, the soldier from before led Xiao Chun to his residence. As there were too many people, it was naturally impossible to arrange for each person to have a room. In the room that was arranged for Xiao Chun, there were already 3 other people. Their cultivation was the same as Xiao Chen's, which was the Tao querying realm. It was obvious that the City Lord's Mansion differentiated the cultivators with different cultivation levels. Furthermore, according to their cultivation levels, they were treated differently. For example, Tao querying realm martial artists had 4 people to a room. Tao querying realm martial artists had 8 people to a room. Tao Gate Realm and Tao Transformation Realm martial artists had 2 people to a room. Tao King Realm, Tao Emperor Realm, and Half Saints had 1 room each. The higher the cultivation, the better the treatment. Xiaochen didn't have any objections to this. Moreover, the soldier even explained in a courteous manner, "Brother Xiaochun, because there are too many people, we can only put up with it for now. But don't worry, my City Lord's estate will provide for all your needs during this period of time. Once we've repelled the wind ghost, my City Lord's estate will compensate you accordingly. I hope Brother Xiao can be understanding." In order to unite everyone's strength to resist the wind ghost's attack, the City Lord's Mansion naturally wouldn't be stingy. Not only would they be responsible for everyone's living and cultivation needs, they would even provide compensation when the time came. Xiaochen nodded with a smile when he heard the soldier. Xiaochun didn't object to the actions of the City Lord's estate at all. Even though the environment was a little harsh and 4 people to a room, it couldn't be helped. It was an extraordinary period. After exchanging some pleasantries with the soldier left while Xiao Chun strode into the room. At this moment, everything else in the room had been moved away. Only 4 futons were left in the corner of the room. After nodding to the other 3, Xiao Chun went to the only empty futon and sat down cross-legged. Before the wind ghost attack broke out, everyone didn't need to do anything. They just needed to cultivate in peace. In just a day, all the cultivators at the Tao querying realm and above in the entire Jinshan city had been gathered by the City Lord's estate. They were distributed in 90 inns. After counting, the number of people had exceeded 300,000. 300,000 people was indeed a large number. However, compared to the 2 million wind ghost, it was nothing. Moreover, more than half of the 300,000 people were at the Tao querying realm and Tao validation realm. There were more than 200,000 people, followed by 70,000 Tao Gate Realm and Tao Transformation Realm cultivators. As for Tao King Realm and Tao Transformation Realm cultivators, there were less than 20,000. As for Half Saints, there wasn't a single one. Just as the City Lord's estate was nervously preparing to deal with the wind ghost attack, a piece of information that made Saint Kuang Li's expression change drastically came back. Previously, they had sent a half-saint deacon of the ancient sacred sect to check the situation in the periphery of the wind plane. Now that the news had come back, even Saint Kuang Li's expression darkened. A trace of disbelief flashed through his eyes. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 675. St. Kwong Li's face turned gloomy when he saw the latest news about the wind ghost attack. Noticing the change in St. Kwong Li's expression, the other half-saint deacons beside him asked curiously, "Sir Saint, what happened? Take a look for yourselves." St. Kwong Li passed the information to everyone. With a single glance, the expressions of the half-saint deacons of the ancient sacred sect changed drastically. Some of them couldn't help but cry out in alarm. How is this possible? In fact, the content of the information was very simple. It said that the wind ghost didn't show any signs of attacking. They were just biding their time in the periphery of the wind plain near Wind Suppression City. However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that the wind ghost didn't choose to attack. Their purpose was to wait for other wind ghosts to arrive. In other words, there were already 2 million wind ghosts attacking, but now it seemed impossible because the number of wind ghosts was still increasing. In less than a day, the number of wind ghosts had increased from 2 million to 3 million. And it seemed that this was far from the end. There were still wind ghosts coming from the depths of the wind plain. At the same time, the number of wind ghosts was shocking, but what worried St. Kwong Li even more was that there were more than one wind ghost king, which was comparable to a half-saint expert. Now, there were 12 of them. Wind ghosts didn't have a specific strength classification. Wind ghosts below the half-saint level were collectively called wind ghosts. Only those whose strength reached the half-saint level were called wind ghost kings. Wind ghosts comparable to human saints were called wind ghost saint kings. Now, there were 12 wind ghost kings in the group of wind ghosts. To be called wind ghost kings, they were not only much stronger than ordinary wind ghosts, they were comparable to human half-saints. At the same time, the wind ghost kings had a qualitative leap in intelligence compared to ordinary wind ghosts. Although they weren't as intelligent as humans, they were comparable to low-level demon beasts. How is this possible? There are 12 wind ghost kings. What do these wind ghosts want to do? A half-saint deacon of the ancient sacred sect said in shock. He couldn't help but look at St. Kwong Li. At this moment, St. Kwong Li had become the pillar of the entire Wind Suppression City. Facing everyone's gaze, St. Kwong Li sighed softly and said, "It seems that the wind ghost attack this time is much more serious than we thought. Perhaps the scale is not inferior to the one 20 years ago. This, Your Holiness, 20 years ago, the number of wind ghosts numbered in the tens of millions. Is that even possible? Moreover, we still haven't found the wind ghost Saint King," said one of the half-saint deacons after hearing St. Kwong Li's words. A wind ghost holy king was a wind ghost comparable to a saint. They were the strongest in the wind plains. In the entire wind ghost race, there weren't many wind ghost holy kings. Not only were wind ghost holy kings powerful, but their intelligence wasn't inferior to that of humans. For this reason, the large-scale wind ghost attacks in history were all backed by holy kings. Therefore, once a wind ghost holy king appeared, it meant that this wind ghost attack couldn't be underestimated. According to the current intelligence, there wasn't any sign of a wind ghost holy king among the wind ghost horde. But St. Kwong Li sneered. The intelligence of those beasts isn't inferior to that of humans. They are extremely cunning. Even though we haven't encountered them yet, I'm sure that there's a wind ghost holy king hiding nearby, waiting to deal a fatal blow to our Wind Suppression City. St. Kwong Li knew a lot about wind ghost holy kings. These beasts couldn't be viewed as ordinary wind ghosts anymore. Hearing St. Kwong Li's words, the half-saint deacons looked at each other and asked in a heavy tone, "Then what should we do? If a wind ghost holy king is behind this, I'm afraid Wind Suppression City's strength alone isn't enough." They thought that as long as they gathered the strength of Wind Suppression City, they would be able to stop the wind ghost attack. But now, it seemed that even if they gathered all the cultivators in Wind Suppression City, it wouldn't be enough to deal with the wind ghost attack. St. Kwong Li said coldly in the face of the half-saint deacon's worries, "Wind Suppression City alone won't be able to stop the wind ghost attack. Therefore, I've decided to raise the level of the ancient saint token to level 2. St. Kwong Li had just issued a grade 1 ancient sage order this morning, but in less than a day, he was going to raise it to grade 2. Hearing this, the deacon's expressions changed slightly. However, one of them soon thought of something. But Lord Sacred Master, this level 2 ancient saint token requires the approval of more than half of the Sacred Masters to take effect. Of course I know. I've already sent a message back to the sect. I'm sure there will be a reply soon. St. Kuang Li said, the issuance of a level 2 ancient saint token required the approval of more than half of the saints in the ancient saint sect. It was important to note that the above-mentioned half-saints included Tianfeng Saint, Tianyue Saint, and the others. In other words, all the saints in the ancient saint state had the right to make decisions. Only by obtaining the agreement of more than half saints among the saints could a level 2 ancient saint order take effect and be carried out. Just as St. Kuang Li finished speaking, an invisible wave came from the heaven stage. This wave could only be sensed by saints. St. Kuang Li smiled faintly. The ancient saint sect's summons. The appearance of this wave was the ancient saint sect's signal for all the saints to gather for a meeting. St. Kuang Li then went to a secret room in the backyard of the city lord's mansion. There was a talisman array here. The collateral family members sat in the center of the array. St. Kuang Li then closed his eyes. At the same time, in the center of the distant ancient saint state, there was a vast plain. In the middle of the plain, there was a long stretch of buildings arranged in an orderly manner. This was where the ancient saint sect was located. In the center of the entire complex, there was a simple and majestic hall. In the circular hall, there were more than 10 futons arranged in an orderly manner. At this moment, more than half of the futons were occupied by saints with different expressions. However, the figures of these saints were somewhat illusory. With a single glance, one could tell that these illusory figures were merely projections of these saints. Just like St. Kuang Li, these saints from different parts of the ancient saint state were gathered together through the power of the talisman array. Please collect, vote, recommend. In a chapter. Chapter 676. The images of the saints were projected into the hall one after another. In just a short time, the originally empty hall was filled with more than a dozen praying mats that formed a circle. Everyone present was a saint of the ancient sacred sect. Each of them was an existence that could make the ancient sacred state and even the Tiana continent tremble with a stomp of their feet. At this time, these saints had gathered together, and one of them took the initiative to speak. Hey, it's just a wind ghost riot. There's no need to make such a big commotion. What are you planning to do by gathering all of us here? Are you going to slaughter the Wind Ghost clan? The saint's tone was very relaxed, as if he wasn't worried about the Wind Ghost attack at all. Hearing his words, Saint Qingju also spoke with a smile on his face. It's been a long time since we've gathered together. However, we can't be careless about the Wind Ghost attack. Let Kuang Li do the talking. He should know best. Saint Qingju looked at Saint Kuang Li. This information was sent back by Saint Kuang Li. Obviously, he had the most right to speak among all the saints present. Hearing Saint Qingju's words, Saint Kuang Li didn't speak nonsense and immediately spoke in a deep voice. According to the current information, it can be concluded that the Wind Ghost attack is definitely controlled by the Wind Ghost Saint King behind the scenes. Although the scale of the attack can't be determined for the time being, I think everyone hasn't forgotten what happened 20 years ago, right? The Wind Ghost attack 20 years ago was also the largest Wind Ghost attack in history. At that time, because the ancient sacred sect didn't respond in time, the wind-suppressing city was directly breached. Almost all the cultivators in the city were killed or injured. The entire wind-suppressing city was completely swept by the Wind Ghost and almost turned into a ghost town. In the end, only less than 1,000 people survived in the entire wind-suppressing city. The rest were all slaughtered by the Wind Ghost. The Wind Ghost's attack could be said to be deeply engraved in their hearts, and it was exactly because of that all the saints present here fell silent when they heard Saint Kuang Li's words, and then one of them spoke in a low voice. Kuang Li's words make sense. We can't afford to be careless with the Wind Ghost attack. Since there are signs that the Wind Ghost Holy King is behind this attack, I think we should just activate the level 2 Ancient Saint token. The saint suggested to activate the grade 2 Ancient Saint token. However, there were naturally some who objected to it. Another saint said indifferently, "Second grade Ancient Saint token? Was it necessary? You're making a mountain out of molehill." I don't think so. Since we've already guessed it, it's only natural that we take precautions. I'm in favor of activating the grade 2 Ancient Sage token. I agree too. The saints spoke one after another. In the end, after most of them expressed their opinions, the saints voted. The result was that more than half of the saints agreed to activate the second grade Ancient Saint token. Seeing this, the saint in the middle, who is also the current sect leader of the Ancient Saints sect, Saint Gumu, spoke up. Half of the votes pass. Activate the second grade Ancient Saint token. With more than half of the saints agreeing to activate the second grade Ancient Saint token, the matter could be considered to have come to an end. However, Saint Qing-ju said afterward, "Since the second grade Ancient Saint token has been activated, I'm afraid there will be more people in wind-suppressing city. Quangli alone won't be enough. Who knows how many wind ghost holy kings will appear?" Hearing Saint Qing-ju's words, the saints naturally had no objections. Since the second grade Ancient Saint token had been activated, wind-suppressing city naturally couldn't only have Saint Quangli as the sole overseer. In this way, they would choose from the saints who agreed to activate the second grade Ancient Saint token to see who would be willing to go to wind-suppressing city to deal with the wind ghost attack. In the end, Saint Qing-ju was the first to express his willingness to go to wind-suppressing city. Following that, 3 other saints were willing to go to wind-suppressing city. In this way, there were 5 saints in wind-suppressing city. At the same time, the various saint sects would also send their elders, deacons, and disciples to wind-suppressing city. According to the rules, after activating the second grade Ancient Saint token, each saint sect would have to send at least 1 personal disciple, 10 core disciples, and no less than 1,000 ordinary disciples, deacons, and elders. At the same time, the Ancient Saint sect would have to send at least 1 saint. The second grade Ancient Saint token had a hard and fast rule. As such, the various saints present naturally sent their disciples to wind-suppressing city. However, the curious thing was that after the Heavenly Wind Saint sent out his core disciples and ordinary disciples, he did not mention sending the direct disciple of the Heavenly Wind Saint sect. Saint Gumu asked curiously, "Tianfeng, didn't Tianfeng Shengzong send a personal disciple to wind-suppressing city?" Tianfeng Shengzong already has a personal disciple in wind-suppressing city. There's no need to send another one, Saint Tianfeng said indifferently. Xiaochun was in wind-suppressing city now. In this way, Saint Tianfeng naturally didn't need to send another personal disciple. Hearing this, the saints were slightly stunned, but they didn't say anything. Since there was already a personal disciple in wind-suppressing city, then there was no problem. After settling these matters, all the saints left one after another. Very soon, the grand hall became empty again. It looked cold and desolate, forming a sharp contrast with the gathering of saints earlier. After a discussion, the next day, the wind-suppressing city governor's mansion issued the second grade Ancient Saint token. Once this news came out, it immediately caused a huge uproar in wind-suppressing city. The second grade Ancient Saint token meant that the situation was very serious. In an instant, the warriors in wind-suppressing city guessed that the scale of the wind ghost attack this time would be extremely terrifying. It might not be any weaker than the one 20 years ago. Otherwise, why would the Ancient Saint sect issue the second grade Ancient Saint token? The atmosphere in wind-suppressing city became more and more tense after the second grade Ancient Saint token was issued. A somber and heavy aura continued to spread in wind-suppressing city. At the same time, as time passed, the various saint sects in the Ancient Saint state all sent their disciples to wind-suppressing city. In an instant, the transportation array in wind-suppressing city was completely busy. There was almost no time to rest. Groups of disciples from different saint sects continuously walked out of the transportation array. At first, it was the ordinary disciples. Then it was the deacons and elders of the various saint sects, followed by the core disciples. In the end, the personal disciples of the various saint sects also arrived one after another. 2 days passed in a row. One morning, Xiao Chun, who was cultivating in his room, heard the excited voices of people outside his room. Have you heard? The personal disciples of the various saint sects have arrived. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 677. After the arrival of the core disciples of each sect, the pro-disciples also arrived one after another. Along with the voices outside the room, the other 3 people who shared the room with Xiao Chun also stood up one after another. In 2 days, the 4 of them had lived under the same roof, so everyone could be considered to be familiar with each other. When the 3 saw that Xiao Chun was still indifferent, one of them asked curiously, "Xiao Chun, aren't you going to welcome the pro-disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong? Also, I heard that because of the issuance of the 2nd grade ancient saint order and the arrival of the pro-disciples of each sect, everyone's living quarters will also be redistributed in the future. It is said that everyone will be allocated according to their respective sections." The pro-disciples of each sect had arrived one after another, and everyone's living quarters would also be redistributed. Previously, everyone was allocated according to their cultivation. No matter which sect they came from, as long as their cultivation was at the same level, they would be allocated together. Just like the room that Xiao Chun and the other 3 were currently staying in, the 4 of them were from different sections. Now, with the arrival of the experts and pro-disciples of each sect, the City Lord Mansion would also allocate the disciples of each sect to one place. Just like the inn that Xiao Chun was staying in now, there were a total of more than 20 courtyards here. After the redistribution, each courtyard would be allocated to a disciple of a sect. In this way, people of the same sect could live together, and in this way, there would be less trouble. After all, when the people of each sect gathered together, it was inevitable that there would be conflicts on a daily basis. Going to welcome the pro-disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong. Hearing this, Xiao Chun couldn't help but laugh. Yesterday, the Tianfeng saint had told Xiao Chun through the sound-transmitting charm that Tianfeng Shengzong wouldn't send any other pro-disciples this time because he was in Jinfeng City. And this time, everything in Jinfeng City will be decided by Xiao Chun. Since he already knew that he was the pro-disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong, Xiao Chun naturally didn't need to welcome anyone. However, now that the living quarters had to be redistributed, Xiao Chun naturally had to go to Tianfeng Shengzong's residence to meet everyone. Smiling slightly, Xiao Chun said faintly, "You're right, but I don't need to welcome the pro-disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong. I'll go directly to their residence to meet them." After saying that, Xiao Chun stood up. Hearing this, the other 3 had a helpless look on their faces. Xiao Chun, this guy was really arrogant. He didn't even put the pro-disciples of his sect in his eyes. Naturally, the 3 of them didn't know that Xiao Chun was the pro-disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. They shook their heads helplessly and prepared to go to the transmission array to welcome the pro-disciples of each sect. However, before they left, the disciple of Tianyu's sacred sect took the initiative to invite them. Xiao Chun, Tianfeng Shengzong, and Tianyu's sacred sect's residences have been arranged together. Let's go together. The residences of Tianyu's sacred sect and Tianfeng Shengzong were arranged to be in the same inn. Moreover, they were 2 small courtyards adjacent to each other. Therefore, in the face of this Tianfeng Shengzong's disciples' invitation, Xiao Chun didn't refuse. He nodded slightly, and then the 2 of them walked out of the room together. This disciple of Tianyu's sacred sect was just an ordinary disciple. The 2 of them walked out of the inn together, but he wanted to go to the transmission array to welcome the pro-disciples of Tianyu's sacred sect. He invited Xiao Chun to go with him. After thinking about it for a while, he decided that it was on the way as well. Therefore, Xiao Chun did not refuse. As the people of the various sacred sects continuously poured into Jinfeng City, the streets of the entire Jinfeng City were bustling with noise. Disciples of different sects gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and were discussing something in low voices. On the way to Zhanfeng City's transmission array, there was already a sea of people here. From time to time, there would be pro-disciples of the various sacred sects walking out. Every time a pro-disciple of their own sect appeared, the disciples of the various sects who were already waiting here would hastily go up to welcome them. In the crowd, Xiao Chun found the Tianyue sacred sect's people. He quickly went up and followed behind this Tianyue sacred sect's disciple. However, in the Tianyue sacred sect's crowd, Xiao Chun saw a familiar voice. It was Gu Mu. Originally, Xiao Chun didn't plan to go up, but since he saw Gu Mu, he naturally had to go up and greet him. Gu Mu, he softly called out. Hearing Xiao Chun's voice, Gu Mu looked over. When he saw that the person who came was Xiao Chun, Gu Mu's face immediately showed a smile. He quickly went up and greeted him. Xiao Chun, I didn't expect you to come here too. The last time he met Gu Mu was during the sacred sect selection in Tianfeng Xingzhou. Because the timing wasn't right, the two of them didn't have a chance to have a good chat. Now that they met again, they naturally had a lot to talk about. Seeing that Gu Mu was wearing the Tianyue sacred sect's core disciple uniform and had the word 1 in front of his chest, it meant that Gu Mu was now the number 1 core disciple of Tianyue sacred sect. Regarding Gu Mu being able to become the number 1 core disciple of Tianyue sacred sect, Xiao Chun was extremely happy. He smiled and said, "Brat, you're not bad. You've already become the number 1 core disciple of Tianyue sacred sect. I was just lucky. However, what about you? You're definitely a core disciple. With your abnormal strength, how could you be worse than me?" Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Gu Mu also smiled and replied. Because Xiao Chun wasn't wearing the Tianfeng Shengzong disciple uniform, let alone the Tianfeng robe, Gu Mu didn't know what status Xiao Chun had in Tianfeng Shengzong. However, thinking about it, it definitely wouldn't be worse than him. The two of them happily chatted. Just as the two of them were talking, an extremely untimely voice rang out. "Yo, isn't this Tianfeng Shengzong's genius? What? Have you come to Zhanfeng City to die?" Hearing this voice full of sarcasm, Xiao Chun and Gu Mu both looked over. With a glance, Xiao Chun saw an old acquaintance walking over. This person was Zhang Mingfeng. Back then, during the Tianfeng Shengzong selection, Xiao Chun and Zhang Mingfeng had a battle. In that battle, he defeated Zhang Mingfeng. He didn't expect that this time he would also come. Facing Xiao Chun's gaze, Zhang Mingfeng's eyes had a thick trace of hatred. Ever since he was young, Zhang Mingfeng had always boasted of being a genius. However, after entering Tianyue's sacred sect, Zhang Mingfeng was disappointed. This was because Gu Mu, who was in the same batch as him, had steadily surpassed him in all aspects. Until now, Gu Mu was already the number 1 core disciple, while he, Zhang Mingfeng, was merely ranked 12th within the core disciples. His status was far inferior to Gu Mu, so Zhang Mingfeng naturally held a grudge. Adding on the fact that Gu Mu and Xiao Chun were old acquaintances, and Xiao Chun had once defeated him in front of everyone, Zhang Mingfeng naturally held a grudge against Xiao Chun as well. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 678. Xiao Chun could see the dense hatred in Zhang Mingfeng's eyes with a single glance. However, he didn't take it to heart. Previously, Zhang Mingfeng could still be considered a strong opponent, but now, Xiao Chun didn't even put him in his eyes. Xiao Chun only glanced at him indifferently before retracting his gaze. He didn't even have the intention to pay attention to him. Being completely ignored by Xiao Chun, the hatred in Zhang Mingfeng's eyes was even more monstrous. He strode in front of Xiao Chun and said coldly, "Xiao Chun, do you want to die?" Being ignored by Xiao Chun, Zhang Mingfeng was furious. He felt as if in Xiao Chun's eyes, he was just an ant that liked to jump around. His heart was burning with anger. In response, Xiao Chun said indifferently, "I'm not interested in you. Don't bother me again." It was rare for him to meet Gu Mu, so Xiao Chun naturally didn't want to flying around his ear. However, after hearing Xiao Chun's words, Zhang Mingfeng was even more furious. Unable to hold back the anger in his heart, Zhang Mingfeng roared angrily and immediately threw out a punch. aiming directly at Xiao Chen's face. Xiao Chen, you're courting death. Zhang Mingfeng directly chose to attack. In response, a cold glint flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. Immediately, Xiao Chen swung out his palm as if he was swatting a fly. Zhang Mingfeng's attack was directly broken. At the same time, Xiao Chen's palm fiercely landed on Zhang Mingfeng's face. Without any ability to resist, Zhang Mingfeng was directly sent flying by a Xiao Chen slap. What a joke! Although Xiao Chen hadn't been in Tian Fengxing Zone for too long, his improvement was extremely huge. How could Zhang Mingfeng be compared to Xiao Chen now? In front of Xiao Chen, he didn't even have the slightest ability to fight back. Seeing this, even Gu Mu on the side was stunned. Clearly, he didn't think that Xiao Chen's strength was already this strong. After the shock, Gu Mu helplessly shook his head and bitterly laughed. In his heart, he secretly thought that it was probably impossible to catch up to Xiao Chen. Being able to control himself and not being shaken off was already not easy. After casually getting rid of Zhang Mingfeng, this annoying fly, Xiao Chen planned on continuing to talk with Gu Mu. However, at this moment, another person walked out of the teleportation array. Following this person's appearance, the disciples of Tianyue Sacred Sect all excitedly went up to greet him. The person who came was wearing the Tianyue Sacred Robe. Clearly, he was a direct disciple of Tianyue Sacred Sect. Regarding the direct disciples of Tianyue Sacred Sect, Xiao Chun only knew Su Tianzi. However, unfortunately, the person who came to wine-suppressing city this time clearly wasn't Su Tianzi, but someone called Lu Tianming. From Gu Mu's mouth, Xiao Chun also knew that this Lu Tianming was ranked 10th among the 10 great direct disciples of Tianyue Sacred Sect. With just a glance, Xiao Chun withdrew his gaze. Clearly, he wasn't too interested in Lu Tianming. After experiencing the matter of Sacredine Sect, Xiao Chen's gaze was no longer limited to direct disciples. In Xiao Chen's heart, the ancient sacred sect's holy son was his goal, because only then would he have the ability to directly face Sacred In's sect and rescue Gu Lingyao. Walking out of the teleportation array like a moon surrounded by stars, Lu Tianming walked over with large strides under the escort of a group of Tianyue Sacred Sect disciples. However, when he saw Zhang Mingfeng lying on the ground like a dead dog, Lu Tianming slightly frowned and said, "Junior Zhang, what happened to you?" This Zhang Mingfeng just happened to be one of Lu Tianming's lackeys. Therefore, when he saw Zhang Mingfeng being beaten up, Lu Tianming naturally felt displeased in his heart. Hearing Lu Tianming's question, Zhang Mingfeng immediately began to complain tearfully. From his mouth, Xiao Chun had become a vile person who used his power to bully others and sneak attack from the shadows. According to what Zhang Mingfeng said, Xiao Chun and himself had some enmity in the past. Originally, he didn't want to cause any trouble when they met this time. However, who would have thought that Xiao Chun would suddenly sneak attack him? Because he was caught off guard, he was successfully ambushed by Xiao Chun. Zhang Mingfeng didn't intentionally hide his voice, so his words were naturally heard by Xiao Chun and Gu Mu. However, Xiao Chun couldn't even be bothered to explain. Even Gu Mu, who was at the side, wanted to speak, but was stopped by Xiao Chun. From Xiao Chun's point of view, for someone like Zhang Mingfeng, no matter how much you explained to him, it would be like playing the lute to a cow. Moreover, was a mere Lu Tianming worth him explaining? Let him think what he wanted. Under Zhang Mingfeng's false accusation, Lu Tianming's gaze quickly landed on Xiao Chun. Seeing this, Zhang Mingfeng's eyes flashed with a hint of complacency as he thought to himself, "Xiao Chun, let's see if you can still survive this time. Senior brother Lu is a direct disciple. In a while, I'll definitely let senior brother Lu beat you up until you have to look for your teeth on the ground." Facing Lu Tianming's gaze, Gu Mu's face was a bit ugly. Although he was the #1 core disciple of the Tianyue Sacred Sect, he wasn't Lu Tianming's opponent. Now that Lu Tianming clearly believed Zhang Mingfeng's words, Gu Mu started to worry in his heart. On the contrary, Xiao Chun, facing Lu Tianming's gaze, didn't have the slightest change of expression. He indifferently looked back at him. Even when Lu Tianming stepped in front of him, Xiao Chun's expression still didn't change. The two people's gazes met, and the disciples of the Tianyu's sacred sect all came over. Even the surrounding disciples of the other sects all had curious expressions as they looked over. The atmosphere became more and more tense. At this time, Gumu said to Lu Tianming, "Senior brother Lu, this matter isn't Zhang." Gumu wanted to explain a few words for Xiao Chun, but before he could finish, he was directly interrupted by Lu Tianming. "You don't have the right to speak here." He didn't give Gumu any face. Facing this, a trace of coldness flashed through Gumu's eyes. In reality, the difference in strength between him and Lu Tianming wasn't that big. Gumu firmly believed that as long as he was given a bit more time, he would definitely be able to defeat Lu Tianming, kick him off the altar, and become a direct disciple. However, right now, he still wasn't Lu Tianming's opponent. Seeing Gumu being scolded by Lu Tianming, the coldness in Xiao Chen's eyes slowly intensified. However, Lu Tianming acted as if he didn't see this at all. With a condescending attitude, he questioned Xiao Chun. "You're a disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong? How arrogant! You actually dared to sneak attack a disciple of my Tianyu's sacred sect." Who is the direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong? Tell him to come out. I want to see if he'll give me, Lu Tianming, an explanation. Lu Tianming didn't know Xiao Chen's identity at all. The moment he opened his mouth, he wanted the direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong to come out and give him an explanation. It felt as if he was saying that Xiao Chun wasn't worthy to speak to him. Facing the overbearing Lu Tianming, just when everyone thought that Xiao Chun would definitely lower his head and admit his mistake, an unexpected sentence came out of Xiao Chen's mouth. "Who do you think you are? Give you an explanation? You're worthy?" When these words came out, Lu Tianming was stunned. The surrounding Tianyu's sacred sect disciples were also stunned, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 679. Xiao Chen's words caused the expressions of the surrounding disciples to change greatly. Lu Tianming was even more furious. He never thought that Xiao Chen would dare to speak to him in such a tone. After all, he was a direct disciple. His eyes flashed with anger, and he laughed out loud. Lu Tianming immediately laughed and said, Good, what a reckless brat. I originally wanted to leave some face for your Tianfeng Shengzong's direct disciple, but now it seems that there is no need for that." As he spoke, a terrifying aura erupted from Lu Tianming's body. As soon as this aura appeared, everyone present involuntarily retreated. For a moment, only Xiao Chun and Gumu were left in front of Lu Tianming. Looking straight at Lu Tianming and facing his oppressive aura, Xiao Chun did not change his expression at all. A mere Lu Tianming was not worthy of Xiao Chen's attention. Their gazes collided. Then, under everyone's gaze, Lu Tianming made his move. He directly struck out with his palm, and a terrifying aura instantly enveloped Xiao Chun. Seeing Lu Tianming make his move, the surrounding disciples had different expressions as they whispered in low voices. "Who is this person? He actually dares to go against a direct disciple. He's dead for sure. I heard that he is a disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. He really doesn't know what's good for him. Tianfeng Shengzong. Interesting. I wonder who will be the direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong this time." However, it seems that this brat is going to lose face today. Everyone discussed in low voices. From their words, it was clear that most of them felt that Xiao Chun was dead for sure. After all, in the Tiana continent, provoking a direct disciple was not something that anyone knew. While everyone was discussing in low voices, Lu Tianming's attack arrived as expected. However, the scene that everyone had imagined did not occur. Facing Lu Tianming's attack, Xiao Chun did not dodge. Instead, he directly threw out a punch. For a moment, the fist and palm collided. With a muffled bang, a strong wind blew and the ground began to crack. At the same time, the auras of the two people were equally matched. Xiao Chun wasn't defeated by Lu Tianming's palm strike. On the contrary, he actually blocked Lu Tianming's congratulation head-on. Although Lu Tianming didn't use any martial skills, neither did Xiao Chun. He had used the same casual attack to block Lu Tianming's palm. Faced with such an outcome, many of the disciples present were unable to remain calm, especially those disciples of Tianyu's sacred sect. Each and every one of them looked as if they had seen a ghost. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Lu Tianming was a direct disciple of the Tianyu's sacred sect. Thus, how could Xiao Chun block Lu Tianming's attack? Even Gu Mu, who was standing behind Xiao Chun, had a face full of shock. He guessed that Xiao Chun's strength must have improved a lot, but he never thought that Xiao Chun's strength was actually comparable to Lu Tianming's. Everyone was shocked. However, this was just the beginning. Was Xiao Chun on par with Lu Tianming? It might have been before, but now, Xiao Chun's strength was clearly superior to Lu Tianming's. As the 10th direct disciple of the Tianyu's sacred sect, Lu Tianming's strength was indeed stronger than He Chushuan's in the past. However, he wasn't as strong as Yuqing. Now, Xiao Chun's strength was actually between Bai Zhong and Yuqing. In other words, Xiao Chun was slightly stronger than Lu Tianming. During the confrontation, Xiao Chun didn't care about Lu Tianming's extremely ugly expression. He increased the strength in his hand once again. In an instant, Lu Tianming was directly pushed back a few steps by Xiao Chun. He stumbled back 5 steps. This result made everyone's eyes almost pop out of their sockets. It was already hard for them to accept that Xiao Chun could block Lu Tianming's attack. But now, not only did Xiao Chun block Lu Tianming's attack, but he also forced Lu Tianming to retreat. In other words, Xiao Chun had the upper hand in the confrontation just now. He actually forced a direct disciple to retreat. Many disciples stared blankly at Xiao Chun and couldn't help but exclaim. Compared to the shock of the others, Lu Tianming, as the person involved, felt as though he was struck by lightning. He was a direct disciple, but now he was forced to retreat by this guy in front of him. Lu Tianming stared at Xiao Chun. From the collision just now, he clearly felt how terrifying Xiao Chun's strength was. His expression turned ugly as he said in an ice-cold tone, "Who exactly are you?" Lu Tianming originally thought that Xiao Chun was only a core disciple of the Tianfeng Shengzong. But now, it seemed that he wasn't. How could a core disciple have such strength? That was impossible. Facing Lu Tianming's question, however, before Xiao Chun could reply, a group of Tianfeng Shengzong disciples strode over. The leader was a core disciple. Previously, everyone went to the inn to look for Xiao Chun, but they didn't find him. When they were about to return, they were attracted by the noise here. Who would have thought that when the Tianfeng Shengzong disciples passed through the crowd, they would see the scene of Xiao Chun forcing Lu Tianming to retreat? They finally found Xiao Chun. The Tianfeng Shengzong disciples were delighted. They quickly stepped forward and respectfully saluted Xiao Chun. "Senior Xiao Chun, look, it's the Tianfeng Shengzong people." Seeing the Tianfeng Shengzong disciples appear, many people looked at the scene in front of them curiously. They also wanted to know who Xiao Chun was. Xiao Chun nodded slightly to the crowd. Then he looked at Lu Tianming again and said calmly, "Didn't you want the direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong to give you an explanation? I am him. Tell me, what explanation do you want?" Hearing this, Lu Tianming was stunned. Xiao Chun's meaning was very clear. He was the direct disciple representing Tianfeng Shengzong. Lu Tianming fixed his gaze on Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun was the direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. However, Lu Tianming had never heard of Xiao Chun among the top 10 direct disciples of Tianfeng Shengzong. He had never seen Xiao Chun before. However, at this time, the Tianfeng Shengzong disciple beside Xiao Chun also spoke. Senior Xiao Chun is the 10th direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. The Tianfeng Shengzong disciples proved Xiao Chun's identity. Lu Tianming and the Tianyu's sacred sect disciples' faces were very ugly. Lu Tianming snorted coldly and said fiercely, "Well, I will remember today's matter. Xiao Chun, let's wait and see." He didn't expect that Xiao Chun was really the direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. So what could Lu Tianming say? They were all direct disciples. Xiaochen obviously wouldn't be afraid of him. As soon as his voice fell, Lu Tianming turned around and left with the Tianyuan sacred sect disciples without waiting for Xiaochen's reply. However, at this time, the Tianyuan sacred sect disciples had mixed feelings in their hearts, especially Zhang Mingfeng. He looked as if he had eaten a fly, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 680. Damn it. How could he be Tian Feng Shengzong's direct disciple? Impossible, absolutely impossible. How long has it been since he entered Tian Feng Shengzong? Following behind Lu Tianming, Zhang Mingfeng roared angrily in his heart. The time Xiao Chun entered Tian Feng Shengzong was the same time as the time he entered Tianyuan's sacred sect. However, now, Xiao Chun was already one of the top 10 direct disciples of Tian Feng Shengzong, while he, Zhang Mingfeng, was only a core disciple. The imbalance in his heart, in addition to various feelings of envy and jealousy, made Zhang Mingfeng unwilling to believe that Xiao Chun was Tian Feng Shengzong's direct disciple, even if he was beaten to death. However, the reality was as such. Even if Zhang Mingfeng was unwilling to admit it, he couldn't change anything. As Lu Tianming left with his people, the atmosphere quickly eased up. Gumu also smiled as he bid farewell to Xiao Chun. You're one step ahead of me again. However, I will also become a direct disciple of Tianyuan's sacred sect very soon. It won't be too long. Gumu naturally encountered his own opportunity on Tiana continent. He had absolute confidence that he could defeat Lu Tianming in a short period of time. At that time, he could also become one of the top 10 direct disciples of Tianyuan's sacred sect. Hearing Gumu's words, Xiao Chun smiled and nodded. If Gumu could become a direct disciple, Xiao Chun would naturally be happy. He wasn't afraid that Gumu's strength would surpass his own. This was because at this very moment, Xiao Chun's gaze was no longer limited to direct disciples. Instead, it was locked onto the unreachable holy sons and holy daughters. After separating from Gumu, Xiao Chun left under the escort of a group of Tian Feng Shengzong disciples. Looking at Xiao Chun's back as he left, the surrounding disciples gradually came back to their senses. Then, someone finally remembered Xiao Chun's matter and said excitedly, "What a pity! Xiao Chun. I remember now. He is indeed a direct disciple of Tian Feng Shengzong. Moreover, it was said that he entered Tian Feng Shengzong for less than 2 years and defeated He Chushuan to become one of the top 10 direct disciples of Tian Feng Shengzong. He entered Tian Feng Shengzong for less than 2 years and became a direct disciple. Such talent. Soon, some of Xiao Chun's deeds were dug up one after another as someone spoke. Oblivious to the discussions of the crowd after he left, he returned to the residence of the Heavenly Wind Saint sect. In a courtyard that could not be considered too big, this was the residence of the Heavenly Wind Saint sect in the wind-suppressing city. Not only were there disciples, but Tian Feng Shengzong's deacons and elders were also staying here. Upon hearing that Xiao Chun had arrived, everyone came out to welcome him. This time, Tian Feng Shengzong had a total of 3 half-step saint elders, 10 deacons, 10 core disciples, and a total of 2,000 ordinary disciples. After bowing to the 3 half-step saint elders and deacons, Xiao Chun turned to the crowd of disciples who were constantly gathering. This time, the disciples who came to wine-suppressing city voluntarily signed up. The higher-ups of Tian Feng Shengzong didn't force them. Xiao Chun also saw many familiar faces in the crowd, such as Mu Feng and the others. Also, among the 10 core disciples, Xiao Chun also saw Wang Feng. He didn't expect that even she would come, so Wang Zong was relieved. Xiao Chun greeted everyone. As for his residence, it was obvious that it had already been prepared for him. As a direct disciple, Xiao Chun's treatment was the same as the half-step saint elders. He also had his own room, unlike the other disciples who had to squeeze a few people into one room. He settled down in Tian Feng Shengzong's residence. As time passed, the people of the various sacred sects also arrived one after another, waiting for the battle with the wind ghost. However, it was a little strange that the wind ghost didn't rashly attack wind-suppressing city this time. At the border of the wind plain, there were already 6 million wind ghosts gathered, and the number of wind ghost kings had increased to as many as 28. Even so, the wind ghost group still didn't have a limit to their attack, which made St. Kwang Li and the other saints in wind-suppressing city even more worried. At this time, there were already 5 saints in wind-suppressing city, but the wind ghost group didn't make any move, which made the 5 saints feel more and more worried. This wasn't a good thing. 6 million people had already gathered, but there was still no limit to their attack. This meant that there would be more wind ghosts gathering. At the same time, there must be a wind ghost saint king behind them. Otherwise, how could the wind ghost group be so calm? Time passed slowly. It had been 7 days since wind-suppressing city was completely under martial law. During these few days, the disciples of the various sects had also received orders from the saints. The battle hadn't started yet, but the disciples of every sect were responsible for guarding the city walls. Tianfeng Xingzong was no exception. However, as a direct disciple, Xiao Chun naturally didn't need to do these things. On this day, the sky had just brightened when Xiao Chun received a message from the city lord's mansion. It said that St. Kwang Li had summoned the direct disciples of the various sects to the city lord's mansion for a meeting. Xiao Chun quickly arrived at the city lord's mansion. When Xiao Chun walked into the main hall in his Tianfeng robe, 5 direct disciples had already arrived. When they saw Xiao Chun, some of them smiled and nodded, while others chose to ignore him. As for Lu Tianming, he snorted and turned his head away, not even looking at Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun didn't care about Lu Tianming's attitude at all and sat down on his own chair. They didn't have to wait for long. Soon, the direct disciples of the ancient sacred state had all arrived. St. Kwang Li and the ancient sacred sects chosen slowly walked into the main hall. This time, the ancient sacred sect had also sent a chosen. This person was actually someone Xiao Chun knew. It was chosen Chunyu, whom he had met once in Tianfeng Xingzong. Chunyu walked side by side with St. Kwang Li. As a holy son, Chunyu's status was not lower than a saint's, and he was completely qualified to sit on the same level as a saint. Behind Chunyu was a pretty girl with a serious expression. No one knew who this girl was. In fact, among the direct disciples present, except for Xiao Chun, this was probably the first time they had seen the chosen. Because it was their first time seeing the chosen, the direct disciples were a little nervous when Chunyu appeared. On the other hand, Chunyu still had that indifferent smile on his face. After seeing Xiao Chun, Chunyu even took the initiative to step forward, ignoring St. Kwang Li, and smiled at Xiao Chun. "Oh, junior brother Xiao Chun, we meet again. I didn't expect that Tianfeng Xingzong would send you here. Is this fate? It seems that the two of us are really fated. Ha! Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." End of chapter. Chapter 681. Chunyu said to Xiao Chun with a cheeky grin. Following Chun Yu's words, the atmosphere in the hall, which was originally extremely solemn, instantly changed. The other personal disciples all looked at Xiao Chun with surprise and envy in their eyes. From Chun Yu's words just now, it was not difficult to tell that Xiao Chun and him knew each other. To be able to know a holy son was simply an incomparable honor. Don't think that there was not much of a difference between a personal disciple and a holy son. Did you see the girl behind Chun Yu? She should be Chun Yu's holy servant. Every holy son and holy daughter of the Tiana continent was qualified to have a holy servant, and every holy servant had the strength of a personal disciple. As for the role of a holy servant, it was actually a bit like a maid. Of course, it was much more advanced and comprehensive than a maid. Not only could they take care of the holy son and holy daughter's daily necessities, but they could also fight for the holy son. What's more, they could even be the holy son's plaything. For example, the 4 holy Yin sect disciples who came with Yin Luan were actually Yin Luan's holy servants and had the strength of a personal disciple. In the face of the enthusiastic Chun Yu, before Xiao Chun could reply, the girl behind him fiercely slapped the back of Chun Yu's head and said with a serious expression, "Holy son, now is not the time to reminisce. Don't forget why you're here. As a holy servant, the girl actually dared to treat Chunyu like this. However, what no one expected was that Chunyu was not the slightest bit angry. Instead, he said with a smile, "Little Isu, you're too serious. Didn't I just see an acquaintance?" Hearing Chunyu's words, the girl still said without a change in expression, "If you want to reminisce, there will be plenty of time later. I hope the Holy Sun will prioritize business." The girl's name was Isu, and she was indeed Chunyu's holy servant. However, unlike Chunyu, Isu's personality was extremely serious. No matter what she did, she was incomparably serious. Faced with Isu's answer, Chunyu immediately surrendered. He smiled at Xiao Chun and then walked to the main seat with a helpless expression. As he walked, he muttered in a low voice, "Sigh, how troublesome. Why does such a troublesome task have to fall on me?" "That's because you're the one with the most free time among all the saints of the ancient sacred sect. Naturally, only you can come," Isu replied calmly after hearing Chunyu's muttering. Chunyu and Saint Kuangli took their seats, while Isu stood behind Chunyu calmly. Saint Kuangli then said, "Don't worry, everyone. The main reason I called you here today is to prepare for the battle. None of the saints dared to underestimate the wind ghost attack at all." Now that Saint Kuangli had brought up the deployment of the battle, the 8 personal disciples became serious and listened carefully to Saint Kuangli. In the face of the wind ghost attack, they naturally had to rely on suppressing Wind City. It was impossible for them to go out of the city and fight the wind ghost. However, there were strong and weak wind ghosts. When facing ordinary wind ghosts, there would naturally be ordinary cultivators to deal with them. As for wind ghost kings and wind ghost saints, there would also be corresponding half-saints and saints to deal with them. As for Xiao Chun and the other direct disciples, their mission was very simple, which was to fight the saint-blooded wind ghost. In simple terms, the saint-blooded wind ghost was the saint clan of wind ghosts. It was a direct descendant of the wind ghost saint king. Just like humans, the saint-blooded wind ghost was born with the bloodline power of the wind ghost saint king. It was on a completely different level from ordinary wind ghosts. It could be said that the saint blood wind ghosts possessed high intelligence from birth. At the same time, their growth speed was also extremely fast. Moreover, their battle prowess was especially strong. In the same realm, in front of many humans, only personal disciples and holy sons could deal with them. The scale of the wind ghost attack was already so large, so the saints guessed that the saint-blooded wind ghost might appear with the saint-blooded wind ghost saint king. Therefore, while the saints were dealing with the saint-blooded wind ghost saint king, the saint-blooded wind ghosts could only be dealt with by the direct disciples and Saint Chunyu. In the face of the large-scale attack of the wind ghost, Xiao Chun and the others' mission was very simple, which was to fight the saint-blooded wind ghost. This was their only mission. As for the rest, they didn't need to intervene. There would be others to deal with it. After telling everyone about the saint-blooded wind ghost in detail, Saint Kuangli did not forget to remind them at the end. Don't underestimate the saint-blooded wind ghost. Its strength is definitely not weaker than your direct disciples. Therefore, once you encounter it, you must do your best to kill it. Otherwise, if a saint-blooded wind ghost runs amok, it will definitely be a disaster for the core disciples and ordinary disciples of the major sections. Saint Kuangli was afraid that they would underestimate the enemy, so he specially reminded them at the end. Hearing Saint Kuangli's words, Xiao Chun and the others nodded solemnly in response. After explaining the deployment before the battle, Saint Kuangli waved his hand, indicating for everyone to disperse. Go back and prepare. In less than 3 days, the wind demons will probably launch a large-scale attack. All of you only need to remember to perform your duties, and be sure not to panic. Hearing Saint Kuangli's words, everyone stood up and bowed, then left the hall one after another. However, just as Xiao Chun was about to leave, Chunyu suddenly called out to him, "Junior brother Xiao, wait a moment." Hearing Chunyu's voice, Xiao Chun turned his head and saw Chunyu walking up with a smile on his face. Chunyu naturally put his arm around Xiao Chun's shoulder and said, "Since we're done talking about business, let's go and have a few drinks. You don't know how much I've been holding back these past few days." Chenyu took the initiative to invite Xiao Chun to have a drink. In this regard, Xiao Chun could not refuse, so he nodded and agreed after thinking about it. However, Isu said indifferently at this time, "No more than 3 jugs." Hearing Isu's words, Chenyu immediately said unhappily, "Little Isu, don't be like this. It's rare for me to drink with junior brother Xiao." No. In the face of Chenyu's request, Isu directly refused without thinking. In this regard, Chenyu persisted for a while, but Isu refused to budge. In the end, he had no choice but to agree helplessly. No more than 3 jugs. Seeing that Chenyu was being controlled by his sacred servant, Xiao Chun was quite curious. Of course, Xiao Chun did not know what a sacred servant was. He only thought that Isu was Chenyu's woman, so he said with a smile, "I didn't expect senior brother Chun to be a henpecked person." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chenyu did not reply. Instead, Isu said indifferently, "I'm not his woman. I'm only his sacred servant. Senior brother Xiao Chun, don't misunderstand." Hearing the words sacred servant, Xiao Chun was puzzled. Seeing this, Chenyu laughed heartily and walked out of the hall with Xiao Chun in his arms. Along the way, Chenyu also told Xiao Chun about the sacred servant, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 682. Along the way, he learned about the sacred servants from Chenyu. As they chatted, the 3 of them arrived at a garden in the backyard of the city lord's estate. This was Chenyu's residence. As a chosen, he was naturally treated much better than him. Not only did he have a room to himself, but he also had a small courtyard to himself. Without saying anything else, Isu went to the kitchen to get something to eat, while Xiao Chun sat down in a pavilion in the garden under Chenyu's warm hospitality. Xiao Chun learned a lot about the chosen from Chenyu. Of course, these were all very simple things. Even if Chenyu didn't say anything, Xiao Chun would learn about them sooner or later. According to Chenyu, the holy sons and holy daughters not only had holy servants, but they also had real power in the ancient saint sect. They were not like the pro-disciples, who only had a title and did not have any power. There were a total of 4 chosen in the ancient sacred sect, and Chenyu was one of them. The ancient sacred sect had divided the disciples into 4 sacred palaces. Every sacred palace had disciples and attendants, and the 4 chosen were the masters of the sacred palaces. It could be said that within the ancient saint sect, the 4 saint sons were in charge of the 4 saint palaces. Apart from the saints, everyone else had to listen to the saint sons' orders. This was a real power. From this, one could see how big the gap between a saint's son and a personal disciple was. Even a random saint servant was a personal disciple. Moreover, there was no limit to the number of sacred servants a chosen could have. It all depended on their preference. For example, Chenyu found it troublesome, so he only had Isu as a single sacred servant, while Yunwan had 4. Chenyu even told Xiao Chun that there was a chosen in the ancient sacred sect who had a total of 10 sacred servants. Every single one of them had the strength of a direct disciple. Now that he had a deeper understanding of the holy sons and holy daughters, Xiao Chun gained a lot from this meal. Chenyu, on the other hand, had a sorrowful expression because he didn't have enough wine. However, no matter how much he cried and begged, Isu wouldn't agree. In the end, Chenyu gloomily sent Xiao Chun out of the city lord manor. Only then did the 2 of them part ways. After returning from Chenyu's place and being summoned by Saint Quangli today, Xiao Chun clearly knew what his mission was. At the same time, after returning to his residence, Xiao Chun found that the 3 half-saint elders of Tianfeng Shengzong had also been summoned to the city lord's mansion. It was obvious that they had their own missions as well. From the most ordinary warriors to the ordinary disciples, core disciples, deacons, half-saint elders, and even the saints, every level of warriors had their own missions. At this moment, the saints had probably already informed every one of their missions. Once the battle started, everyone only needed to follow the arrangements made before the battle and do their own things. As for other matters, they would naturally be dealt with by others. It wasn't the first time that he had experienced such a large-scale battle with millions of people. In the Tianshan continent, Xiao Chun had personally experienced such a large-scale battle. However, the scale of the battle this time was obviously much larger than the one on the heavenly Qin continent. After all, there were as many as 5 saints on the human side. However, in the battle on the heavenly Qin continent, there were only 2 saints in the end. After experiencing such a great battle, Xiao Chun was very much in agreement with the arrangements made by the saints. After all, in a battle of such a scale, it was impossible for anyone to turn the situation around with their own strength, unless their strength had reached a level that could pierce through the heavens and earth. Otherwise, they had to understand how to work together and perform their own duties. Everyone had to complete their missions well, so that they wouldn't lose the battle. Therefore, Xiao Chun was also very clear that once the battle broke out, he only had one goal, which was to stop the Saint Bloodwind Ghost. As for the rest, it had nothing to do with him, and he couldn't do anything about it. Time passed day by day. With the passage of time, the atmosphere in Jinfeng City became more and more tense. A somber atmosphere completely enveloped the entire city. Half a month after the news of the wind ghost attack spread, in the early morning, there was a continuous drizzle in the sky, and thick dark clouds covered the sky and earth. The dark clouds obscured the vision, giving people an extremely oppressive feeling. Today was a day of dense dark clouds, and it was on such a day that Jinfeng City, which had been calm in the tense atmosphere for half a month, finally woke up. With the sound of war drums, the entire Jinfeng City transformed into an operating war machine. According to the deployment before the battle, under the background of the earth-shaking war drums, groups of warriors ran wildly on the streets in an orderly manner. Human warriors were everywhere in the sky and on the ground. On the city wall that faced the wind plains, a continuous stream of warriors gathered. The originally wide city wall was now filled with people. Ordinary warriors and ordinary disciples of the holy sects stood on the city wall with determined expressions. Above them, the core disciples and deacons of the holy sects stood in the air. Above them were the half-saints and Xiao Chen's personal disciples. From the bottom to the top, there were a total of 3 layers of defense, forming a barrier against the wind ghost attack. Early this morning, Saint Quang Li and the others in Jinfeng City finally received the news that the real 8 million wind ghosts had gathered at the border of the wind plain. They finally took action and began to approach Jinfeng City like waves. After receiving this news, the 5 saints naturally did not hesitate at all. They directly ordered the beating of the war drums, and the nearly 1 million warriors in Jinfeng City immediately prepared for battle according to the previous deployment. In terms of numbers, there was a huge gap between human warriors and wind ghosts. However, ordinary humans and ordinary wind ghosts were absolutely incomparable. An ordinary human warrior was definitely stronger than an ordinary wind ghost in the same realm. This was a comparison of the strength of the lowest level of the 2 sides. However, once it reached the level of the wind ghost king, the strength of the wind ghost would undergo an earth-shaking change. In other words, in the face of the wind ghost attack, the most important thing was to see the performance of the half-saints, saints, Xiao Chun, and other personal disciples and saints on the human side. This was because they were dealing with the wind ghost king, the wind ghost saint king, and the saint-blooded wind ghost. Whether they could withstand the attacks of the wind ghost saint king was the key to the battle. After all, the strength of ordinary wind ghosts was actually nothing to be afraid of. As long as they could hold on, the warriors below would have enough time to deal with the numerous ordinary wind ghosts. However, on the other hand, if there was any mistake and a wind ghost king, a wind ghost saint king, and a saint-blooded wind ghost were separated, the impact on the battle would be immeasurable. Please collect, vote, recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 683. Nearly 1 million human cultivators stood on top of the city wall, looking in the direction of the wind plains. Everyone's expression was extremely solemn. The drizzle continued to fall, and the sound of dripping rain could be heard as it fell on the ground. Nearly 1 million people gathered together, but it was very quiet. No one spoke, and even the sound of their breathing was very soft. Under such an oppressive atmosphere, no one knew how much time had passed. Suddenly, someone shouted, "It's here!" Along with this unknown voice, everyone looked over. From the end of their line of sight, something that looked like a wave was rapidly approaching wind-suppressing city. At the end of their line of sight, there was a line between the sea and the sky, and the green wave was constantly approaching wind-suppressing city. As it got closer and closer, everyone could gradually see the true appearance of the green wave. It was actually countless wind ghosts. The wind ghost appearance was somewhat ferocious. Its teeth were sharp and protruded out of its face. Its eyes were also blood red, and its ears were triangular, standing upright. Sharp teeth, sharp claws, ferocious appearance, and green skin. This was how humans described the wind ghost. Millions of wind ghosts let out chilling cries. Their voices were extremely sharp and piercing to the ears. Facing the approaching wind ghost group, many people couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Their eyes couldn't help but flash with a hint of aggression. There was nothing they could do about it. There were too many wind ghosts. In front of the wind ghost group, wind-suppressing city was like a lone boat in the middle of the sea. It was as if the waves could knock it to the bottom of the sea at any time. Many people felt uneasy, especially the younger generation. Most of them had never experienced a wind ghost attack, and some of them had never even seen a wind ghost before. For a moment, everyone's hearts were in turmoil. But at this moment, from the city lord's mansion, 5 terrifying auras soared into the sky. It was almost as if they had materialized. Spiritual energy fluctuations that could be seen with the naked eye soared into the sky, as if they were going to tear apart the layers of dark clouds in the sky. Along with the appearance of these 5 terrifying auras, 5 figures appeared in the sky above the city lord's mansion. They were the 5 saints who guarded wind suppression city. The appearance of the saint gave everyone on the city wall an indescribable and terrifying pressure. It was like a shot of adrenaline to the hearts of the people on the city wall. Their originally frightened hearts slowly calmed down. The 5 saints appeared. They took a step forward and appeared in front of the crowd. As the saints of the present age, they were at the forefront of the crowd in the face of the wave-like wind ghost horde. They faced the ferocious-looking wind ghost horde head-on. Looking at the backs of the 5 saints, there were only 5 of them, but even against the 8 million wind demons, the 5 saints did not lose out in terms of aura. With a faint smile on his face, Saint Qingju laughed. These bastards are still so ferocious. Hearing Saint Qingju's words, another saint beside him replied with a smile, "Don't tell me you still expect the wind ghost to be as courteous as a human. That's not it. But even if they are opponents, I still hope that they look a little better." Saint Qingju's smile did not diminish. Facing the several million wind ghost horde, the 5 saints continued to chat casually. While the saints were chatting, the wind ghost horde was getting closer and closer. At this moment, they were only 10 miles away from wind suppression city. Without the slightest intention of stopping, the wind ghost howled even louder. Their speed seemed to have increased as well. It was as if they wanted to smash through all of wind suppression city's defenses with a single blow. Looking at the roaring wind ghost horde, Saint Kuang Li, who was in the middle, took a step forward and shouted with his back facing the crowd behind him. "Everyone, hold the sword in your hands tightly and face these evil ghosts. Even if you have to exhaust your last bit of flesh, you must not let these bastards take a single step into wind suppression city. Kill!" The sonorous and powerful voice echoed in everyone's ears for a long time. As Saint Kuang Li's last word fell, the human warriors standing on top of the city wall took out their spiritual weapons and held them tightly in their hands. Then they charged out like ferocious beasts. On one side were the ferocious wind ghost horde, and on the other side were the human warriors brimming with killing intent. They were like 2 ancient beasts that had been exposed. The 2 sides collided head-on. The human warriors and the wind ghost horde clashed head-on. Saint Kuang Li's previous words had completely ignited the fighting spirit in everyone's hearts. The little bit of resistance they originally had vanished in an instant on this bloody battlefield. Battle cries shook the sky. Looking at the battle that had already broken out, Xiao Chun and the other personal disciples, as well as the half-saints, St. Kuang Li and the other 4 saints above the city wall, did not move. Their opponents had not yet appeared. They stood proudly in the sky. After the battle broke out, the real 28 Wind Ghost Kings appeared above the Wind Ghost Horde. Seeing the 28 Wind Ghost Kings appear, the half-saints standing with Xiao Chun and the others took a step forward. Their figures directly passed the 5 saints in front of them and came to the front of the Wind Ghost Kings. Soldier against soldier, general against general. The Wind Ghost Kings were the half-saints' opponents. Therefore, without needing anyone to say anything, they had already taken the initiative to meet them. Human half-saints, do you still want to defend Wind Suppression City this time? In your dreams. Looking at the human half-saints in front of it, the leading Wind Ghost King sneered. Hearing the sneer of the Wind Ghost King, a half-saint said in a deep voice, "Bastards will always be bastards. Don't talk nonsense. Everyone, let's do it." As the voice of the half-saint fell, more than 20 half-saints attacked at the same time. For a moment, the terrifying aftermath of the battle was like the end of the world, shaking the sky and earth. It was rare to see a battle between half-saints in the past, but at this moment, there were 50 half-saints fighting fiercely together. In order to avoid the aftermath of the battle affecting the battlefield below, the half-saints also deliberately moved the battlefield to the sky. The Wind Ghost Kings did not refuse. The battle between half-saints had already broken out. At the same time, St. Kuang Li looked at the empty sky in front of him with a calm expression and a cold voice. Still not planning to come out? A bunch of bastards hiding their heads and tails. Following St. Kuang Li's voice, 5 3-meter-tall Wind Ghost Saint Kings appeared. They were not much different from ordinary wind ghosts, except that their bodies were stronger and their faces were more ferocious. When the 5 Wind Ghost Saint Kings appeared, their auras swept out, causing the expressions of Xiao Chun and the other personal disciples to change slightly. They were indeed comparable to saints. The auras of the Wind Ghost Saint Kings were really terrifying. As personal disciples, they could not even bear the simple aura of the Wind Ghost Saint Kings. Please collect, vote, recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 684. It was indeed difficult for Xiao Chun and the others to withstand the 5 Wind Ghost Saint Kings, who were comparable to saints. The pressure from the 5 Wind Ghost Saint Kings had reached an indescribable level. However, just as the 5 Wind Ghost Saint Kings unleashed their terrifying auras, St. Kuang Li and the others released their auras that weren't any weaker than the Wind Ghost Saint Kings. Instantly, the pressure on Xiao Chun and the others dissipated. Breathing a sigh of relief, Xiao Chun's direct disciple couldn't help but look at St. Kuang Li and the others. 5 saints and 5 Wind Ghost Saint Kings stood facing each other. Their auras were stronger than 1,000,000 soldiers. One of the 5 Wind Ghost Saint Kings let out an extremely uncomfortable laugh. 5 human saints. That's quite a lot. Human saints, why don't we negotiate? We'll only massacre Wind Suppression City and then retreat to the Wind Plains. How about it? It's not like Wind Suppression City hasn't been massacred by us Wind Ghosts before, so there's no need for a bloody battle. What do you think? The Wind Ghost Saint King said in an extremely mocking tone. Saint Ching Ju chuckled and replied, "I think you should leave behind 1,000,000 wind ghosts for us, and we'll let you safely retreat to the Wind Plains. What do you think? What's the point of talking so much with them? Attack! We'll massacre Wind Suppression City today." As soon as Saint Ching Ju finished speaking, the other Wind Ghost Saint King clearly had a bad temper. He snorted coldly and chose to attack. Naturally, there was no room for negotiation between humans and wind ghosts. Not to mention, the Wind Ghost St. Kuang Li and the others couldn't possibly back down in the slightest. The 5 saints and the 5 Wind Ghost Saint Kings immediately engaged in a fierce battle. However, a battle between saints naturally couldn't be carried out here. After breaking through to the Saint realm and grasping the power of laws, one could tear space apart. Therefore, a battle between saints was usually carried out in a different space. After all, the power of a saint was too terrifying. If they were to carry it out here, needless to say, even if they managed to stop the wind demon, the entire wind-suppressing city would definitely be destroyed. They also knew that only in a different space would the saints be able to truly have no scruples. The 5 saints and the 5 wind ghost saint kings tore space apart and disappeared into the void at the same time. Chenyu couldn't see how the battle between the saints was going, but he was still grinning cheekily. Really, this group of old men is really a headache when they get hot-blooded. They're even more enthusiastic than us youngsters. As the battles between the saints and the wind ghost saint kings and the saints and wind ghost saint kings broke out one after another, the only ones left standing on the city wall were Xiao Qian's personal disciple and Chenyu, the saint. As though he wasn't nervous at all, the smile on Chenyu's face didn't fade. But as soon as Chenyu finished his sentence, the Saint Bloodwind ghost that hadn't shown up until now finally showed up. There were a total of 10 Saint Bloodwind ghosts with green skin and ferocious expressions. Looking at the 10 Saint Bloodwind ghosts, Chenyu shook his head helplessly and smiled bitterly. I thought I was lucky and didn't have to fight this time. Sigh. Chenyu indeed looked extremely innocent. Upon hearing his words, the leading Saint Bloodwind ghost revealed a sinister smile and said, "If you don't fight, I won't kill you. After all, I don't want to fight to the death with a human saint. How about that?" The Saint Bloodwind ghost who spoke was apparently the strongest among the 4 Saint Bloodwind ghosts. It wasn't hard to tell from the expressions of the other 9 Saint Bloodwind ghosts. It also knew that Chenyu was a human saint. It seemed like the Saint Bloodwind ghost's IQ wasn't low. But after hearing the Saint Bloodwind ghost's words, Chenyu shook his head and said with a smile, That's a good suggestion. But this time, it seems like we can't slack off anymore. Those old men have already put on their weapons and joined the battle personally. It seems like this time, we can only fight with real swords and spears." Upon hearing Chenyu's words, the Saint Bloodwind ghost revealed a disappointed expression and said, "Is that so? What a pity. But since that's the case, don't blame us. Attack. Tear these human geniuses apart for me." Its voice was filled with murderous intent. As soon as the Saint Bloodwind ghost finished speaking, the other 9 Saint Bloodwind ghosts behind it moved immediately. In response, Xiao Chun and the others also reacted immediately. Everyone shifted their feet, and in an instant, the battle line was stretched. However, Xiao Chun and the others unanimously blocked the path of Saint Bloodwind ghost, including Isu. Isu was not to be underestimated. She was Cheng Yu's saint's servant, but her battle prowess had undoubtedly reached the level of a direct disciple. Haha, good reaction. Since that's the case, let's begin. My Wind Ghost Clan, tear apart the enemies before you. Today, I only want to see Wind Suppression City dyed, red with blood. Attack. The leading Saint Bloodwind ghost sneered as it watched Xiao Chun and the others move. Following its words, a battle between the top youths of both sides erupted. The Saint Bloodwind ghosts were all alarmed. The Saint Bloodwind ghost fighting against Xiao Chun slashed out with its claws. Its innately sharp claws tore through the air and struck towards Xiao Chen's heart. Facing the Saint Bloodwind ghost's attack, Xiao Chun wielded the Ink Dragon Sword. He had no intention of dodging. He raised his sword and slashed out. The tip of the sword slashed out and collided with the sharp claws of the Saint Bloodwind ghost. The Ink Dragon Sword was a supreme quality heaven spirit weapon, so there was naturally no need to doubt its sharpness. However, when the two collided, there was a metallic sound. With its innately sharp claws, the Saint Bloodwind ghost actually managed to block the sharpness of the Ink Dragon Sword. With an indifferent expression, Xiao Chan said indifferently, "They are indeed a group of monsters. Their innately sharp claws are no weaker than the Ink Dragon Sword." The hardness of the Saint Bloodwind ghost's claws somewhat exceeded Xiao Chen's expectations. However, when he thought about it, this was normal. After all, wind ghosts were not like humans. They did not know how to refine spirit treasures. When they fought, they could only rely on their sharp claws. Therefore, the sharp claws of a wind ghost were actually equivalent to a human spirit treasure. No one gained the upper hand in the clash with Xiao Chun. In response, the Saint Blood Wind ghost sneered. According to your human classification, you should be a direct disciple. Not bad, you do have the strength of a Saint Blood Wind ghost. However, you will still die today. Remember, my name is Wu Qi. I am the wind ghost who will kill you. As he spoke, Wu Qi's sharp claws flickered with green light. At the same time, the pair of extremely eye-catching claws seemed to be stimulated by something and actually grew again. In an instant, Wu Qi's pair of claws had more than doubled in size. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 685. His already terrifying claws doubled in length. This was the power of the Saint Blood Wind Ghost. Using the power of his bloodline, he could strengthen his claws for a short period of time, doubling their power. Wu Qi's aura also began to rise as his terrifying claws grew. His eyes flashed with undisguised killing intent as he stared at Xiao Chun and spoke word by word. Human, watch me tear you apart. As soon as he finished speaking, Wu Qi took a step forward. With a sonic boom, his body shot toward Xiao Chun like a cannonball. The huge and sharp claws of the demonic beast that were about to tear the beast apart suddenly attacked Xiao Chun. With a ferocious expression, the demonic beast shouted, "Die, human!" Square Heaven Sword Shadow. Facing Wu Qi's attack, Xiao Chun shouted softly. He then slashed out with his sword, using the Square Heaven Sword Shadow. The sky was filled with swords, and Wu Qi's attack was successfully blocked. Furthermore, Wu Qi's entire body was enveloped by sword light. At the same time, Xiao Chun did not stay idle. He pointed his finger and used the Tai sword finger. The horsemen, who were already exhausted from dealing with the sword shadows, had no time to react to the Tai sword finger attack. They were instantly swallowed up. After a series of killing moves, Xiao Chun switched from defense to offense. However, although the Tai sword finger successfully hit Wu Qi, it was clearly not enough to defeat him. As expected, Wu Qi destroyed the Tai sword finger in just a few breaths' time. Wu Qi appeared in front of Xiao Chun again. There were several sword wounds on his body. Although they were not serious, they still made Wu Qi look rather miserable. Blood continuously flowed from his wounds. He did not suffer any substantial injuries, but it was undeniable that Xiao Chun's attack had thoroughly angered Wu Qi. As a Saint Blood Wind ghost, Wu Qi was naturally arrogant. This arrogance was innate. Yet, he was injured by a human. Wu Qi's originally ferocious face became even more terrifying. He clenched his teeth, his eyes bloodshot as he coldly shouted, "I'll tear you apart." The anger in his heart had already reached its boiling point. As soon as he finished speaking, the Wu Qi attacked Xiao Chun again. Wind ghosts did not know any martial techniques. They were very similar to demonic beasts. Their battle strength came from their bloodline and ability. Wu Qi's speed increased again. This time, he was clearly angry. Facing Xiao Chun's Square Heaven Sword Shadow, Wu Qi snorted. "You can't stop me." With that, Wu Qi's claw slammed down. The sword shadows in front of him were instantly shattered. His terrifying claws seemed to tear space itself. After shattering the Square Heaven Sword Shadow, Wu Qi appeared in front of Xiao Chun in a flash. He raised his claw high above his head and slammed down. In response, Xiao Chun used the Ink Dragon sword to block above his head. The sound of metal colliding rang out. The claw and Ink Dragon sword fiercely clashed. But this time, Wu Qi did not hold back at all. His terrifying power flowed through the Ink Dragon sword and into Xiao Chun's body. Resisting Wu Qi's terrifying power, Xiao Chun gradually fell into a disadvantage. Sensing this, the murderous intent in Wu Qi's eyes grew even stronger. This human was simply courting death in a contest of strength. Wind ghosts were like demonic beasts. They were naturally stronger than humans. Human die. With a cold roar, Wu Qi's strength increased explosively. But just as he was about to kill Xiao Chun with a single swipe of his claw, a burst of golden light erupted from Xiao Chun's body. Using the 100 refined battle body, Xiao Chun, who had been forced to retreat, instantly stabilized himself with the help of the 100 refined battle body. At the same time, a power that was not weaker than Wu Qi's suddenly erupted. Wu Qi's expression changed drastically. Then, Xiao Chun knocked away Wu Qi's claw with his sword and slashed with the ink dragon sword. The sword light flashed, but in the nick of time, Wu Qi nimbly dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding a vital spot. However, the sharp wind still left a gash on Wu Qi's face. After suffering 2 setbacks at Xiao Chun's hands in a row, Xiao Chun did not give Wu Qi a chance to catch his breath this time. Gaining the upper hand with 1 strike, Xiao Chun leaped forward and slashed with the ink dragon sword again. The two immediately engaged in a fierce battle. In the fierce battle, Wu Qi grew more and more shocked. Xiao Chun's physical strength was not inferior to his. It should be known that humans and wind ghosts each had their own merits, but in terms of strength, the wind ghost definitely had the upper hand. But Xiao Chun did not give in. With the 100 refined battle body, Xiao Chun's physical strength was not inferior to Wu Qi's at all. Damn it! Wu Qi cursed as he struggled to defend against Xiao Chun's tide-like attacks. Things had somewhat exceeded Wu Qi's expectations. While Xiao Chun and Wu Qi were engaged in a fierce battle, the other direct disciples were also engaged in a fierce battle with the sacred blood wind ghost. Something worthy of mentioning was that the combat strength of the wind ghost in battle with Chun Yu wasn't the slightest bit inferior to Chun Yu. According to the standards of humans, the wind ghost had clearly attained the level of a holy son. Compared to Xiao Chun and the others, Chun Yu's battle was even more terrifying. After all, it was a battle between chosen. Strands of power of laws surrounded Chun Yu, each attack containing terrifying power. The space seemed to be unable to withstand the fierce battle between the two and began to show signs of collapse. With a palm strike, Chun Yu and the Saint Blood Wind Ghost collided head-on. The two of them were forced to take several steps back at the same time. Halting their figures, Chun Yu shook his somewhat numb arm and smiled helplessly. Your father is a wind ghost saint ruler, right? The sacred blood wind ghost was a descendant of a wind ghost saint ruler. However, there were naturally differences in strength among the sacred blood wind ghosts, and their strength was completely dependent on the density of their bloodline. For example, if a sacred blood wind ghost's ancestors were wind ghost saint rulers for 5 generations, then it would only be an ordinary sacred blood wind ghost. However, if it was a direct descendant of a wind ghost saint ruler, then its strength would be on a completely different level. For example, the sacred blood wind ghost fighting Chun Yu was definitely a direct descendant of a wind ghost saint ruler. Either its father or mother had to be a wind ghost saint ruler, which was why it possessed such terrifying bloodline power. Hearing Chun Yu's words, the sacred blood wind ghost sneered. You've guessed correctly. As a reward, I can let you die a little faster. Chun Yu pretended to shake his head helplessly and bitterly smiled. Sigh. That's true. Actually, I really don't want to fight a direct sacred blood wind ghost to the death. Why don't you reconsider? Let's just wait until the battle ends and then retreat. What do you think? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 686. Chun Yu's tone was extremely relaxed, as if he did not feel any pressure at all when facing a wind ghost. Of course, this was mainly because Chun Yu did not plan on killing the wind ghost before him at all. Chun Yu did not plan on fighting to the death, so he naturally did not feel much pressure. After all, at the level of a holy son, they had the power of laws. It was very difficult for them to die. All they needed to do was delay the Saint Bloodwind ghost and wait for the outcome of the battle to be decided. That was Chun Yu's true plan. The Saint Bloodwind ghost chuckled when he heard Chun use joking words. He spoke in an extremely relaxed manner. Yes, you're right. And I admit that I really don't have much of a way to deal with you. Even if we fight for 3 more days, it'll still be difficult to decide the outcome. Both of them were chosen, so it would naturally be difficult to decide the outcome of the battle, let alone kill the other. Speaking to the wind ghost paused before revealing a confident smile. It'll be difficult for us to decide the outcome of the battle, but we'll definitely be the victorious side this time. A gleam of light flashed through Chun Yu's eyes when he saw how confident the wind ghost was. He vaguely sensed that something was off. As if he could tell what Chun Yu was thinking, the wind ghost smiled. We wind ghosts have fought with you humans for who knows how many years, so how could we not be familiar with your ancient sacred sect? In the face of such a large-scale wind ghost attack, your ancient sacred sect will definitely issue an ancient sacred token, right? And once the ancient sacred token appears, the chosen of your ancient sacred sect will definitely come personally. Am I right? The wind ghost race clearly had some understanding of the ancient sacred token. They knew that once the ancient sacred token appeared, one of the chosen of the ancient sacred sect would have to come personally. It was precisely because of this understanding that the wind ghost race already had a corresponding countermeasure. The smile on its face became more and more confident as the wind ghost continued. Since we already knew that one of the holy sons of your ancient saint's sect would come here personally, how could we not make preparations in advance? Do you think that I'm the only one here who is a direct descendant of the holy bloodwind ghost? Hearing this, Chen Yu's expression changed for the first time. He frowned slightly. There was more than one wind ghost with sacred blood, which meant that among the 10 sacred bloodwind ghosts that came this time, there was more than one that was comparable to a chosen. A solemn look flashed across the wind ghost's eyes. Seeing this, the sacred bloodwind ghost said with a confident expression, "My name is Wu Huan. Actually, I have a younger brother." As he spoke, Wu Huan looked towards Wu Qi, who was fighting fiercely with Xiao Chun. Sensing Wu Huan's gaze, Chen Yu also looked toward the place where Xiao Chun and Wu Qi were fighting. There was only a trace of hesitation before Chen Yu shouted, "Junior Xiao Chun, retreat quickly." From Wu Huan's words, Chen Yu was 100% certain that Wu Qi, who was fighting with Xiao Chun, was also a direct descendant of the sacred bloodwind ghost with strength comparable to a chosen. If he wanted Xiao Chun to retreat quickly, the current Xiao Chun simply did not have the strength to contend against a direct descendant of the sacred bloodwind ghost. However, although Chun Yu had warned Xiao Chun immediately, he was still a little slow. Almost at the same time, Wu Qi, who was fighting with Xiao Chun, no longer had the anger from before. An extremely cold smile appeared on his face. Big brother has finally spoken. Boy, you could die now. Previously, in order to numb the human direct disciples, Wu Qi had been deliberately suppressing his strength. Now that he received the signal from his brother, Wu Huan, Wu Qi knew that he did not have to hide his strength anymore. He had to kill Xiao Chun as soon as possible and then defeat the human direct disciples in one fell swoop. As soon as Wu Qi finished speaking, Xiao Sheng, who was inside Xiao Chen's body, immediately sensed something and hurriedly shouted to Xiao Chun, "Boy, retreat quickly. He's a direct descendant of the sacred bloodwind ghost." Xiao Sheng also told Xiao Chun to retreat quickly, but he was still a step too late. At this moment, Wu Qi's aura began to soar, more than 10 times stronger than before. Compared to before, Wu Qi's aura was like the difference between heaven and earth. Xiao Chen's expression changed drastically. He immediately retreated, but Wu Qi's attack was already upon him. His sharp claws slashed down fiercely. This time, the terrifying strength of the claws made all of Xiao Chen's defenses seem to be in vain. Xiao Chen's defenses were blasted apart like a hot knife through butter, and then the claws viciously smashed into Xiao Chen's chest. 3 bloody gashes were deeply imprinted on Xiao Chen's chest. Through the wounds, one could already see the ghastly white bones. One strike had severely injured Xiao Chun. However, Wu Qi was not at all happy about this. Instead, he muttered with a puzzled expression, "Strange, Wu Qi did not hide his strength in that attack. Although it was just a casual attack, Xiao Chun was not directly torn apart." This puzzled Wu Qi. After the previous battle, Wu Qi naturally had a certain understanding of Xiao Chen's strength. He originally thought that he would be able to tear Xiao Chen's body apart without hiding his strength. But now, he only managed to leave 3 bone-deep gashes on Xiao Chen's chest. Xiao Chen was a little surprised. Of course, all of this was thanks to the tempered battle body. If it had not been for the tempered battle body, Xiao Chen would have definitely died from that blow. Xiao Chen fell from the sky with a loud bang. His body smashed into the ground, creating a deep crater. Smoke and dust rose everywhere. Lying in the crater, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with deep shock. It had only been a few breaths of time, but Wu Qi's strength was as different as heaven and earth. At the same time, Xiao Sheng asked nervously, "Boy, are you all right? I won't die yet, but his strength." Xiao Chen gritted his teeth and replied to Xiao Sheng's question. Xiao Sheng was secretly relieved that Xiao Chen's life was not in danger for the time being. Then, he explained to Xiao Chen, "Boy, that sacred bloodwind ghost is not an ordinary sacred bloodwind ghost. He is a direct sacred bloodwind ghost. His father and mother are sacred bloodwind ghost kings, so his bloodline power is much stronger than ordinary sacred bloodwind ghosts. In terms of strength, he is already at the level of a holy son. It's normal that you're not his match." Wu Qi had concealed his strength before, but now, he finally revealed his ferocity. Upon hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Xiao Chen endured the pain and said softly, "Direct sacred blood wind ghost. In other words, there are 2 sacred blood wind ghosts that are comparable to holy sons. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend me." In a chapter. Chapter 687. There were 2 direct saint-blooded wind ghosts, which meant that there were 2 chosen among the saint-blooded wind ghosts, while Chunyu was the only chosen on the human side. Xiao Chen was blasted out of the sky with a single claw. What happened to Xiao Chen naturally attracted the attention of others, such as Yi Su, Lu Tianming, and the other personal disciples. They all subconsciously looked at Wu Qi, their eyes full of disbelief. They were evenly matched just a moment ago, but in the blink of an eye, Xiao Chen was seriously injured with a single slap. This was simply unheard of. Faced with the shock of Yi Su, Lu Tianming, and the others, the saint-blooded wind ghost also sneered. "Haha, Brother Wu Qi is a direct saint-blooded wind ghost. According to your human classification, Brother Wu Qi is a chosen. Haha." Wu Qi's outburst actually boosted the strength of the saint-blooded wind ghost. Of the 2 direct saint-blooded wind ghosts, Wu Huan was holding back Chunyu. As for Wu Qi, he could be said to be an invincible existence. At the very least, the personal disciples couldn't stop him at all. Just like Xiao Chen, he was sent flying with a single slap. Moreover, even if he wasn't dead, he would definitely be seriously injured. Hearing the sneers of the saint-blooded wind ghost, everyone's expression became extremely heavy and ugly. No one had expected there to be 2 direct saint-blooded wind ghosts. Their expressions were ugly, and a feeling of despair spread in their hearts. At the same time, Chunyu directly took out a sound transmission talisman and used it without any hesitation. This voice transmission talisman was not meant to be sent back to the ancient saint sect. Instead, it was meant for another sage of the ancient saint sect. Using this voice transmission talisman, Chunyu thought to himself helplessly, "I wonder if I can make it in time." But since things have come to this, there's no other choice. Seeing that Chunyu used the sound transmission talisman, Wu Huan didn't stop him. He sneered and said, "You still want to contact the other chosen? Unfortunately, it's too late." He guessed that Chunyu was contacting the other chosen of the ancient sacred sect. But even if they used the transportation formation, it would take at least an incense stick's worth of time to arrive. That time was enough for Wu Qi to kill all the personal disciples present. Even if the other chosen came, it would be useless. Chunyu didn't answer Wu Huan's sneer. Now that things had come to this point, there was no other way. Although the hope was slim, it was better than doing nothing. "Can you hold on for an incense stick's time?" The ancient sacred sect sighed. Chunyu's sect side was. However, someone had to be able to hold Wu Qi for an incense stick's worth of time. But in the current situation, it was probably impossible. Because Wu Chen Yu Chun, Chun Chin Yu Chun Chun Chun, Chin Chosen Chun 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 Wind, RR, Chun Chun Chin Chun, Chun, S Chun, S Chun, S Chun, S is Chun's. Su Chin's Chun, Chun, Wu Chen S Chun, Chin's Chun, S is Chun Chin's. If you don't die the first time, let's do it again. I want to see how many times you can hold on. Wu Qi was indeed surprised that he couldn't kill Xiao Chun in one strike, but it didn't matter. At most, he could do it again. This time, Wu Qi was absolutely confident that he could tear Xiao Chun to shreds. Wu Qi stepped forward and walked toward the pit where Xiao Chun was. At the same time, Xiao Chun struggled to stand up. However, due to his severe injuries, even standing was a problem for Xiao Chun, let alone fighting Wu Qi. Moreover, Xiao Chun didn't have the strength to fight against Wu Qi, who was no longer hiding his strength. As the dust settled, one could vaguely see Wu Qi's figure approaching. Xiao Chun smiled helplessly. He didn't know what to say. This was the second time he had met a chosen, and it was the same. He couldn't resist at all. Just as Xiao Chun was feeling disappointed, Xiao Sheng's voice suddenly rang out in Xiao Chen's mind. Kid, that little rascal Chun Yu just used the voice transmission talisman. I believe that the ancient sacred sect's reinforcements will arrive soon. Xiao Sheng had already seen Chun Yu use the voice transmission talisman. However, when he heard Chun Yu's words, Xiao Chun smiled bitterly and said, "The problem is, who can go against the Wuqi? I can't even take one strike from him." As long as they could hold on until the other chosen arrived, they could still fight. However, Chun Yu was being held back by Wu Huan. Who could stop Wu Qi? Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Xiao Sheng seemed to have a plan. He said calmly, "Kid, I'll borrow your body. With the power of my remnant soul, I should be able to hold off Wu Qi for a while until the other chosen arrive." No one could stop Wu Qi. At this time, Xiao Sheng could only take action himself. He could temporarily control Xiao Chen's body through his saint soul. Only then would he be qualified to fight against Wu Qi. Of course, this was only a short-term solution. Once the battle dragged on, Xiao Sheng wouldn't be able to stop Wu Qi. After all, Xiao Sheng was only his saint soul, and his power was very limited. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Xiao Chen knew that this was the only way. He didn't say anything and relaxed his mind. At the same time, a strange power slowly spread out from Xiao Sheng's saint soul, spreading to every corner of Xiao Chen's body. For a moment, Xiao Chen felt that he had lost control of his body. His consciousness still rejoiced, but he couldn't control his body anymore. It was as if he had become a bystander. He knew that his body had been controlled by Xiao Sheng. When Xiao Sheng took control of Xiao Chen's body, the surrounding smoke and dust had completely dissipated. Wu Qi had arrived in front of Xiao Chen and looked down at Xiao Chen. Wu Qi sneered, "Human, you can die now. This time, I'll tear you apart." With that, Wu Qi no longer hesitated and once again slammed his claw toward Xiao Chen. Seeing this, the faces of Chun Yu, Yi Su, Lu Tianming, and the others changed. There was no doubt in their hearts that Xiao Chen was definitely going to die this time. They all thought that Xiao Chen was definitely going to die. However, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Xiao Chen, no, it should be Xiao Sheng now, raised his sword and slashed at Wu Qi's claws. The faint power of laws wrapped around the blade and whizzed out, colliding fiercely with Wu Qi's claws. When the two collided, to everyone's surprise, Wu Qi's claw didn't break Xiao Sheng's attack. On the contrary, Xiao Sheng's sword successfully blocked Wu Qi's attack. Seeing this, everyone, including Wu Huan and the Saint Bloodwind Ghost, said in disbelief, "How is this possible? He blocked it? Please add it to your collection. Monthly vote, recommended." End of chapter. Chapter 688. Just when everyone thought that Xiao Chen was going to die, Xiao Chen actually managed to block the attack of Wu Qi, who had the strength of a son of God. He didn't even have the strength to resist before, but now he successfully blocked the attack. The huge contrast stunned everyone. Of course, They didn't know that the one who blocked the attack wasn't Xiao Chun, but Xiao Sheng. He was just borrowing Xiao Chen's body. How is this possible? How can this human block brother Wu Qi's attack? A Saint Bloodwind ghost said in disbelief. Even Wu Huan's expression changed drastically. Could this human be the holy son of the ancient sacred sect? No, he's definitely not one of the chosen of the ancient sacred sect. Wu Huan did not expect that Xiao Chun would be able to block Wu Qi's attack. Just like Wu Huan, Chen Yu's face was also filled with excitement. However, unlike Wu Huan, Chen Yu's eyes were filled with excitement. If Xiao Chun could block Wu Qi's attack, didn't that mean that Xiao Chun could contend against Wu Qi? If that was the case, then there was still a chance. Brother Xiao Chun didn't need to defeat Wu Qi. He just needed to hold on for an incense stick's worth of time. Thinking of this, Chen Yu didn't care too much. He immediately shouted to Xiao Chun, Junior Xiao Chun, stop Wu Qi. You don't need to do too much. The other chosen will arrive in an incense stick's worth of time. Now that he was being held back by Wu Huan, he could only place all his hopes on Xiao Chun. After all, other than Xiao Chun, the other direct disciples couldn't stop Wu Qi. Wu Huan's face darkened when he heard Chen Yu's words. He had thought that everything was under his control, but Xiao Chun had unexpectedly appeared. Wu Huan's confident expression finally darkened. Wu Huan shouted coldly as he slammed his claw down fiercely. You want to stop Wu Qi with such calmness? Dream on. Seeing that Wu Huan was enraged, Chen Yu chuckled as he blocked Wu Huan's attack. What's wrong? Are you flustered and exasperated? Xiao Chun gave Chen Yu hope, but also made Wu Huan panic. The two of them once again engaged in a fierce battle. This time, Wu Huan was obviously serious. However, it was still somewhat impossible for Wu Huan to take down Chen Yu with his strength. The two of them fought fiercely. Wu Huan was mostly venting his anger. While Wu Huan and Chen Yu were engaged in a fierce battle, Wu Qi, who had just recovered from his shock, glared at Xiao Chun with burning anger in his eyes. An indescribable sense of humiliation welled up in him. It was as if Xiao Chun had been toying with him since the beginning of the battle. He felt as if he was being toyed with by Xiao Chun. Every time Wu Qi thought that victory was in his grasp and that he could kill Xiao Chun in one blow, Xiao Chun would be able to block his attack for the first time. This made Wu Qi feel extremely humiliated. His teeth chattered as if they were about to be crushed. The killing intent in his heart had already exploded. Wu Qi slammed his claw down again, this time with even more force. He shouted angrily, "Human, go to hell." He was completely enraged. However, in the face of Wu Qi's attack, Xiao Sheng, who was controlling Xiao Chen's body, slashed out with his sword again without any change in expression. The sword and the sharp claw collided fiercely once again. The sound of metal clashing rang out once more. At the same time, the ground where the two of them were standing shattered with a loud boom. Wu Qi clearly did not hold back at all. In another head-on clash, Xiao Sheng was forced back. However, he managed to block Wu Qi's attack, but he was still at a disadvantage. Xiao Sheng staggered back 7 steps before he managed to stop himself. The blood in his chest churned. With great difficulty, he resisted the urge to vomit blood. Xiao Sheng smiled bitterly. It's really not easy. Holy son of the ancient sacred sect, you have to come quickly. Otherwise, I won't be able to hold on for long. He felt as if he was a tiger that was bullied by a dog. However, there was nothing he could do. After all, Xiao Sheng was only left with a wisp of his soul. He had already done his best to hold off Wu Qi for half an hour. In contrast to Xiao Sheng's helplessness, Wu Qi was completely enraged when he saw his attack being blocked again. With a roar, Wu Qi attacked Xiao Chen once more. He was completely enraged. Wu Qi's attacks fell like a tidal wave, not giving Xiao Chen any time to breathe. Facing the enraged Wu Qi, Xiao Sheng, who was controlling Xiao Chen's body, struggled to raise his sword to resist. However, the gap between the two of them gradually became apparent. As the battle continued, Xiao Sheng began to show signs of fatigue. However, even though Xiao Sheng was completely at a disadvantage, it would not be easy for Wu Qi to win. At least until now, Wu Qi had not been able to break through Xiao Sheng's defense. The terrifying shockwaves from the battle continued to sweep out. The shockwaves from the battle between Xiao Sheng and Wu Qi were only slightly weaker than those from Wu Huan and Chun Yu. Feeling the terrifying aftershocks, the rest of the direct disciples were already in a state of shock. Xiao Chun was able to hold on for so long in the face of the Wu Qi's frenzied attacks. It was no exaggeration to say that if any of them had been in Xiao Chen's place, they would have been torn to pieces by the Wu Qi. Is Xiao Chen's battle strength so strong? How can he only be Tian Feng Shengzong's 10th direct disciple? Even the first direct disciple would not have such strength. Cheng Yu's saint servant, Yisu, thought to himself. Many direct disciples had the same thoughts as Yisu. The strength that Xiao Chun had displayed was really too terrifying. It had already surpassed the scope of a direct disciple. With such battle strength, how could Xiao Chun only be Tian Feng Shengzong's 10th direct disciple? It was absolutely impossible. Lu Tianming was as shocked as the others, but there was also a trace of fear in his heart. After all, he had some conflicts with Xiao Chun before. Now that he saw that Xiao Chun actually had such strength, Lu Tianming naturally felt fear in his heart. After all, based on the battle strength that Xiao Chun had displayed, perhaps one move was enough to take Lu Tianming's life. The development of the situation was unexpected. Wu Qi, who had been attacking for a long time, had completely gone crazy. He knew very well that although he had the advantage now, if he still could not take down Xiao Chun, then the other saints of the ancient sacred sect would arrive. At that time, all their preparations would be in vain. Because of his anxiety, Wu Qi also attacked crazily without regard for anything else. He wanted to take down Xiao Chun in the shortest time possible. Please add, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 689. Facing the desperate Wu Qi, Xiao Sheng was under a lot of pressure. Fortunately, Xiao Chen's body was supported by the tempered battle body. Otherwise, he would have reached his limit a long time ago. Xiao Sheng had been maintaining a defensive posture. He knew very well that it was impossible to defeat Wu Qi with just a wisp of soul in Xiao Chen's body. Moreover, Xiao Sheng could not exhaust all the energy of this wisp of soul, because once he did, he would directly disappear. Wu Qi only cared about defense. Facing Xiao Sheng's impenetrable defense, Wu Qi almost vomited blood. He had clearly suppressed Xiao Sheng, but he could not do anything about it. This feeling was really sullen to the extreme. Of course, Wu Qi did not know that Xiao Sheng was only able to do this because of his experience. No matter how down and out he was, Xiao Sheng was once the #1 saint of the Tian continent. His combat experience was extremely rich, especially when compared to Wu Qi, a junior like him. After failing to break through Xiao Sheng's defenses, Wu Qi could not help cursing angrily as he watched the battle drag on. Damn it, human, do you only know how to hide in your shell like a turtle? Wu Qi was really anxious because the incense sticks time was almost up. Who knew when the other saints of the ancient sacred sect would arrive? It was not just Wu Qi. On the other side, Wu Huan was also calmly trying his best to shake off Chun Yu's entanglement and help Wu Qi. But how could Chun Yu not know what he was thinking? He entangled Wu Huan tightly, not giving him any chance to escape. Wu Huan also shouted angrily in response. Chun Yu, do you want to fight to the death with me? Chun Yu was holding Wu Huan back, while the Wu Qi seemed to be unable to do anything to Xiao Chun. Wu Huan roared. Chun Yu said with a smile, fight to the death. Don't you think that's ridiculous? It seems that the intelligence of the Wind Ghost clan is indeed worrying. Chun Yu was indeed amused by Wu Huan's roar. However, he was also very curious about Xiao Chun. He did not expect Xiao Chun to have such strength. If not for Xiao Chun, Lu Tianming and the other personal disciples would have died at the hands of the Wu cavalry. It had to be said that Wu Huan's plan was indeed good. They knew that the ancient sage sect would only send one holy son, so they sent 2 wind ghosts with saint blood. Unfortunately, no matter how much Wu Huan calculated, he absolutely did not take into account the variable Xiao Chun. Because of Xiao Chen's efforts, It was now the Saint Bloodwind Ghost's turn to fight. After all, the longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for them. Once the other Saint Children of the ancient sacred sect received the news and rushed over, the situation would be completely different. He tried his best to break free from Chun Yu's control and help the Wu cavalry, but no matter what method he used, Chun Yu was like a maggot that stuck to him. The smile on Chun Yu's face grew brighter and brighter as he dodged Wu Huan's punch. The time it takes for an incense stick to burn is almost up. Looks like your plan is going to fail this time. Wu Huan clenched his teeth when he heard this. However, he was already cursing Xiao Chun in his heart. The plan this time had been completely ruined by Xiao Chun alone. His killing intent towards Xiao Chun had reached its peak. At the same time, Xiao Sheng, who had been resisting the Wu cavalry's crazy attacks, was also suffering. If the brats of the ancient sage sect don't come, I won't be able to hold on. Xiao Sheng had already reached his limit after resisting the Wu cavalry for so long. To be precise, Xiao Qin's body was about to reach its limit. Once Xiao Qin's body couldn't hold on, Xiao Sheng would be powerless no matter how powerful he was. He could clearly feel that his body was constantly reaching its limit. Not only Xiao Sheng, but even Xiao Chun, who had lost control of his body, could feel it. He was also constantly urging the Saint Children of the ancient sage sect to hurry up and appear. However, Xiao Chun and Xiao Sheng's prayers didn't seem to have any effect. After another 100 moves, Xiao Qin's body finally reached its limit. There was a momentary deviation in his movements, and this small deviation was accurately grasped by the Wu cavalry. With a claw, he broke through Xiao Sheng's defense. Wu Qi sneered. Aha! Human, you still have to die in the end. Die. Finally, he broke through Xiao Sheng's defense. At this moment, Wu Qi let out a long sigh of relief. His hands did not stop moving. His sharp and huge claws went straight for Xiao Qin's head, as if he wanted to smash Xiao Qin's head into pieces. Seeing Wu Qi's claws getting closer and closer, Xiao Sheng and Xiao Chun couldn't do anything because their bodies couldn't react at all. While Wu Qi was laughing heartily and Xiao Chun and Xiao Sheng were on the brink of despair, a green light flashed from Wind Suppression City. Wu Qi's face darkened in the face of this green light attack. He only had two choices. He could either stop and avoid this green light, or he could continue to attack. However, he would most likely be injured by this green light in the end. Without much hesitation, Wu Qi chose to stop. In this way, Xiao Chun managed to save his life at the last moment. As the green light forced the dark cavalry to retreat, a handsome young man, wearing a white robe with a large ancient character embroidered on the back of the robe, walked out of the wind-suppressing city in large strides. With the appearance of this young man, Chun Yu, who was fighting fiercely with Wu Huan, revealed an unnatural expression and said, "Why is this god of death here?" Facing this young man, Chun Yu's expression was somewhat unnatural. From his expression, it was not difficult to see that Chun Yu, who had always been carefree, was somewhat helpless in front of this young man. Sure enough, just as Chun Yu finished speaking, the youth had already arrived in front of Wu Qi, a navy blue spear in his hand as he spoke expressionlessly. Direct sacred blood wind ghost. At the same time, the young man's gaze shifted from Wu Qi to Chun Yu, who was still fighting fiercely. You need to ask the sect for help for such a small matter? Chun Yu, it seems like you're getting worse and worse. He was clearly dissatisfied with Chun Yu. In response, Chun Yu smiled apologetically. That, Senior Hu Fei, aren't there two direct sacred bloodwind ghosts? I can't handle them alone. The name of the young man was Hu Fei. Just like Chun Yu, he was also a saint's son of the ancient saint sect. Chun Yu, who was well aware of Hu Fei's character, knew that this fellow was a killing god who only knew how to cultivate. Therefore, when he saw that it was actually Hu Fei who had arrived, Hu Fei was completely helpless. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 690. In the face of Hu Fei, Chun Yu only felt a headache. He didn't know if it was because they were incompatible. Although they were both holy sons of the ancient saint sect, Chun Yu and Hu Fei never had any common topics to talk about. When they were together, they didn't have any common topics to talk about. When the two of them were together, it was like a bull's head and a horse's mouth. It was like fire and water. This clearly had something to do with their personalities. Chun Yu was undisciplined and simple-minded. He had no desire for victory or defeat. Even when completing the missions assigned by the ancient sacred sect, Chun Yu would only muddle through. He rarely fought with his life on the line. On the other hand, Hu Fei was completely different. Hu Fei's desire for victory was very strong. He also had an incomparable thirst for battle. He could be said to be a battle maniac. In any battle, even if the opponent was a weak Dao, querying realm martial artist, Hu Fei would give it his all. According to Hu Fei's own words, this was out of respect for battle. Their completely opposite personalities also caused the two of them to be incompatible. Hearing Hu Fei's slightly mocking words, Chun Yu smiled helplessly and did not say anything. He already knew that this battle maniac would say this. However, even if Chun Yu wanted to beat around the bush, Hu Fei clearly had no intention of letting him do as he wished. After a short pause, Hu Fei continued, "After I kill this blood saint wind ghost Chong, if you still haven't decided a victor, I'll join forces with him to attack you." When Hu Fei said this, Chun Yu almost vomited blood. What did he mean? Was he forcing a duck onto a perch? He wanted to join forces with Wu Huan to attack him? This Hu Fei could not differentiate between friend and foe. Chun Yu felt helpless and anxious, but he did not doubt Hu Fei's words. This guy was a lunatic. He would do anything. "Hey, Hu Fei, we are brothers from the same sect. So if you don't want to be killed by me and the Wind Ghost, you'd better finish off your opponent quickly. With your strength, the battle has dragged on for so long. Do you think I don't know why?" Hu Fei interrupted without giving Chun Yu a chance to speak. Then, Hu Fei retracted his gaze and looked at Wu Qi. Instantly, a strong fighting spirit erupted from his body. "The last time I fought a direct Sacred Blood Wind Ghost was 5 years ago. I hope you won't disappoint me," Hu Fei said calmly as he stared at Wu Qi with a strong desire to fight. As he spoke, Hu Fei casually sent Xiao Chun flying with a wave of his hand. At the same time, his indifferent voice was transmitted into Xiao Chen's ears. Those who have lost their ability to fight should not be a hindrance here. Before the battle broke out, Hu Fei rudely sent Xiao Chun back to the top of suppressing Wind City's city walls. Although it was said to be sent back, it was more accurate to say that he directly sent Xiao Chun flying back. Xiao Chun fell heavily on the city wall. His already heavily injured body became even worse. He felt as if a few more of his bones had been broken. He grimaced in pain as he cursed. "This guy, doesn't he know that he should treat the injured more gently?" Xiao Chun cursed angrily. However, he still endured the pain and struggled to stand up. He leaned against the city wall and looked in Hu Fei's direction. The fighting spirit that erupted from Hu Fei's body had shocked Xiao Chun. He had never felt such a strong fighting spirit before. It was as if he wanted to fight against the heavens and earth. After sending Xiao Chun away, Hu Fei no longer had any plans. At the same time, Wu Qi also regained his senses and said coldly, "So what if another chosen saint has come? Do you think you can kill me? Everyone's fighting strength is about the same. At most, no one could do anything to the other." Wu Qi knew that with Hu Fei's appearance, Wu Huan's plan had completely failed. However, despite his disappointment, Wu Qi was not too worried. From the battle between Chun Yu and Wu Huan, Wu Qi could see that the human chosen saint's fighting strength was about the same as the Wind Ghost's. Both sides fought fiercely, but no one could do anything to the other. However, as soon as he said this, Hu Fei revealed a mocking smile. "Our fighting strength? I don't remember letting you see my strength. Do you really think you know our chosen saint very well? Do you really think that the Wind Ghost with Saint's blood who fought fiercely with Chun Yu was able to hold on until now because of his strength?" Hu Fei asked several questions in a row. Wu Qi's eyes flashed with suspicion. He did not know what Hu Fei meant, but soon, Hu Fei gave him the answer with facts. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura erupted from Hu Fei's body. At the same time, a power of concept that seemed to pierce through heaven and earth soared into the sky. This power of concept was so strong that even Xiao Chun, who was on the city wall, could clearly feel it. At the same time, Xiao Chen's expression changed. Perfect spear intent. The power of concept that erupted from Hu Fei's body was spear intent, and it had reached the perfect spear intent. One had to know that a perfect spear intent could no longer be described as terrifying. The terrifying aura continued to engulf everything around Hu Fei. The ground was torn apart by the sharp spear intent, as if it was a piece of paper. After Hu Fei's power of concept had reached the great perfection realm, he didn't even need to deliberately do anything. He only needed to release his power of concept, and the surrounding ground would be unable to bear it. An unprecedented pressure came from Hu Fei's body. It was like a wave, each wave higher than the last. Wu Qi's face turned paler. They were both chosen ones, but Wu Qi felt that Hu Fei was several times more dangerous than Chun Yu. It was hard to believe that the two of them were on the same level. Looking at Wu Qi's pale face, Hu Fei said indifferently, "Our power? It seems that your Wind Ghost clan does not understand our chosen ones at all. The Wind Ghost that fought with Chun, you should be your brother, right? Do you want to know why he was able to last so long against Chun Yu? It's very simple. It's because Chun Yu has never been serious from the beginning. Chun Yu has never had any desire for victory or defeat. However, this does not mean that you can underestimate his strength, and do not use this to judge the strength of the human Holy Sun. Since you want to see our strength, I will fulfill your wish." After saying that, Hu Fei ignored Wu Qi and thrust his spear forward. The ground cracked inch by inch, and the surrounding space distorted to the extreme. At the same time, a dazzling green light burst out from the spear. Facing Hu Fei's attack, Wu Qi's eyes were filled with disbelief. "I can't dodge it. I can't block it. It's over." Such a thought unconsciously appeared in his mind. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 691. Wu Qi's expression changed when he saw Hu Fei's spear. An aura of death enveloped Wu Qi's body. It was only now that Wu Qi finally understood how foolish he had been during the battle with Xiao Chun. He thought that Xiao Chun had the strength of a holy sun. After all, he was able to block so many of his attacks. Wu Qi thought that this was not something a direct disciple could do. However, at this moment, when Wu Qi faced Hu Fei, he only felt that his previous thoughts were laughable. Xiao Chun was not at the level of the Son of God. He was far from it. It was ridiculous that the Wu Qi still thought that Xiao Chun was a human son of God. His heart was filled with bitterness and shock, but it was too late to say anything now. There was no time to think because Hu Fei's attack had already arrived. It carried an incomparably terrifying aura as it blasted towards Wu Qi. Wu Qi's eyes were filled with madness when he saw Hu Fei's attack. He had no way out. He could only go all out against Hu Fei. Otherwise, he would die here. Wu Qi roared angrily. Following his roar, a rich blood energy surged out from his body. Wu Qi could no longer care about anything else. He activated his bloodline power without any hesitation. Hu Fei sneered when he felt Wu Qi's surging bloodline power. Bloodline power? Interesting. Wind ghosts were the same as demonic beasts. Their strength was determined by their bloodline power. However, once the bloodline power was activated, the Wind Ghost clan would be able to possess great strength for a short period of time. However, after this period of time, they would fall into a period of weakness. Therefore, activating and burning bloodline power was equivalent to a secret technique of humans. There were side effects. Without any hesitation, Wu Qi activated his bloodline power. It could be seen that Wu Qi was giving it his all. There was no other way. If he didn't give it his all, Wu Qi wouldn't be a match for Hu Fei. His aura continued to rise. Hu Fei was not afraid at all. On the contrary, his battle intent became even stronger. Before Wu Qi could take the initiative to attack, Hu Fei had already made the first move. The long sword in his hand swept across, and the powerful force seemed to distort the space around him. Facing Hu Fei's attack again, Wu Qi naturally didn't dare to be careless. He blocked with both hands, and the sound of metal colliding rang out. Then, Wu Qi was sent flying. Although he wasn't injured, Wu Qi clearly hadn't expected Hu Fei's strength to be so great. Although he had successfully blocked the attack, that terrifying force had still sent him flying without any reason. Your defense is not bad, but your strength is too weak. Is this all you Wind Ghost bloodline power can do? It's disappointing. Hu Fei said indifferently after his attack succeeded. He did not give Wu Qi any chance to retaliate as he leaped forward, and the two of them once again engaged in a fierce battle. Without the slightest hesitation, Wu Qi was at a complete disadvantage in the face of Hu Fei. Hu Fei's ferocious attacks made Wu Qi suffer unspeakably. While Hu Fei and Wu Qi were fighting fiercely, on the other side, Chunyu, who was fighting Wu Huan, seemed to have become a different person. Initially, Chunyu didn't really care about the outcome of the battle. He just wanted to complete the task given by the Lord. However, the appearance of Hu Fei forced Chunyu to show his true strength. This guy was a lunatic. God knows if he would really join forces with Wu Huan to attack Chunyu. Chunyu had to end the battle before Hu Fei did. Chunyu held a white, iron fan in his hand. This was Chunyu's weapon. At this moment, Chunyu was no longer as lazy, indifferent, and domineering as before. His attacks were like a tidal wave, attacking Wu Huan wave after wave. Wu Huan had already fought with Chunyu before, but he had never imagined that Chunyu's strength would be so terrifying. Wu Huan's face was extremely gloomy as he blocked Chunyu's attacks and shouted in disbelief. "Despicable human, you actually hid your strength." To put it bluntly, the previous battle with Chunyu was just a farce to Wu Huan. The human holy son in front of him had never been serious before. Wu Huan felt like he was being toyed with. This made him furious. He was a wind ghost with a direct sacred blood, but he was being played around by a human. Wu Huan was furious. However, Chunyu did not care. "Actually, I didn't want to do this either. Wouldn't it be better for everyone to drag it out and leave after the battle ended? Who knew that you guys would provoke this crazy Hu Fei? There's no other way. Although I didn't want to, I didn't have a choice." As he spoke, the iron fan in Chunyu's hand flashed, and the sharp surface of the fan left a shallow wound on Wu Huan's neck. Fortunately, Wu Huan's reaction was fast enough. Otherwise, his head would have fallen to the ground. Chunyu laughed bitterly and helplessly when his attack failed. However, he did not stop moving. He took a step forward, and his entire body turned into an afterimage as he quickly charged towards Wu Huan. It was obvious that Chunyu had cultivated a saint-class martial skill. But thinking about it, as a saint-class martial skill of the ancient saint sect, it was natural for him to master a saint-class martial skill. But thinking about it, as a saint-class martial skill of the ancient saint sect, it was natural for him to master a saint-class martial skill. Wu Huan found it harder and harder to withstand Chunyu's attacks. Gradually, Wu Huan began to show signs of defeat. Moreover, it wasn't just him. The Wu Qi on the other side was in an even more miserable state. Even though Wu Qi had ignited his bloodline power, he was still beaten to a pulp by Hu Fei. Wu Qi was already severely injured. Seeing this, Hu Fei had no intention of holding back, as he said indifferently, "It seems that I have overestimated you, sacred blood wind ghost." As he spoke, the spear in Hu Fei's hand flashed with a green light. The light was so blinding that it was difficult to look at it directly. At the same time, Wu Qi felt an extreme aura of death enveloping him. He wanted to dodge, but for some reason, his body could not move. Wu Qi could only watch as Hu Fei thrust his spear toward his heart, his eyes flashing with terror. "No," he shouted. "Don't." Wu Qi was afraid in the face of death. However, his shout could not change anything. The spear pierced through his heart without any deviation. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter, Chapter 692. Without any hesitation, he pierced Wu Qi's heart with his spear. Darkness swept towards Wu Qi. As a direct descendant of the Saint Bloodwind ghost, Wu Qi probably never thought that he would die here. Wu Qi's death was a huge blow to the Wind Demon's side, especially to Wu Huan. After all, Wu Qi was his younger brother. Wu Huan, who was fighting fiercely with Chun Yu, immediately went mad when he saw his own brother being killed by Hu Fei. He roared angrily and swung his claws at Chun Yu. Then, he charged madly at Wu Qi. Facing the crazy Wu Huan, the other Saint Bloodwind ghosts took the opportunity to leave the battlefield when Wu Qi died. At this moment, two Saint Bloodwind ghosts pulled Wu Huan back and said with a serious expression, "Brother Wu Huan, don't be rash. The humans have two saints now." Hu Fei had killed Wu Qi. Everyone knew very well what this meant. It was clear that they could not continue fighting. Otherwise, not only Wu Qi, but all the Saint Bloodwind ghosts present would be killed. Hu Fei was now free. If he joined forces with Chun Yu, Wu Huan would have no chance of survival. It would be impossible for him to run away. Because they understood this, the two Saint Bloodwind ghosts also left the battle and stopped the crazy Wu Huan. Hearing the two Saint Bloodwind ghosts' words, Wu Huan naturally understood this principle. However, seeing Wu Qi being killed in front of his eyes had indeed caused him to lose his mind for a moment. Now that he gradually calmed down, and with the persuasion of the two Saint Bloodwind ghosts, Wu Huan naturally rode his donkey down the slope. He glared at Hu Fei fiercely and then turned to leave. Wu Huan fled with the rest of the Saint Bloodwind ghost. Hu Fei did not chase after them. Clearly, after killing Wu Qi, Hu Fei had lost interest in the Saint Bloodwind ghost and did not bother to chase after them. If Hu Fei didn't chase after them, then it was even more impossible for Chun Yu to do so. He couldn't wait for these Saint-Blooded Wind ghosts to retreat on their own. That way, he wouldn't have to fight anymore. Since the two holy scions did not give chase, the other personal disciples did not do so as well, allowing Wu Huan and the others to flee in panic. Hu Fei looked at Chun Yu in displeasure. "Hurry up and finish this battle. I still have things to do." Now that the Saint Bloodwind ghost had retreated, the next step was naturally to deal with the small fries. As for the Wind Ghost King and the Wind Ghost Saint King, they would naturally be dealt with by the half-saints and saints. Chun Yu wanted to end the battle here as soon as possible. However, when he heard Hu Fei's words, he replied nonchalantly, "If you want to go by yourself. I'm tired." Clearly, Chun Yu would not take action again. The Sacred Bloodwind Ghost had already retreated. Chun Yu's mission could be considered to have been completed perfectly. Although there had been a small interlude, the result was good. After hearing Chun Yu's reply, Hu Fei also knew this guy's character. Without saying anything else, he rushed down to the battlefield in a flash. The human cultivators and the wind ghosts were still fighting fiercely below. There was no other way. There were just too many wind ghosts. Although the human cultivators were far stronger than the wind ghosts, it was still difficult to determine the victor in a short period of time. However, with Hu Fei's participation in the originally intense battle, the scales of victory quickly tilted towards the human cultivators. Like a tiger in a flock of sheep, Hu Fei rushed into the group of wind ghosts by himself and instantly slaughtered the wind ghosts. No matter what level the wind ghost was, it was no match for Hu Fei. Seeing Hu Fei happily slaughtering the wind ghost group by himself, the personal disciples present were all stunned. As personal disciples, they could be said to be the closest to the chosen saint in the younger generation. It seemed like they were only one step away, but now they knew that this step was like the difference between heaven and earth. Even Xiao Chun, who was on the city wall, had a shocked expression on his face as he muttered softly, "This is the true strength of a chosen saint." It seems like Yin Luan was still holding back. It wasn't that Xiao Chun had never met a chosen saint before. However, whether it was Yin Luan or Chun Yu, both of them had never truly displayed the terror of a chosen saint. But now, Hu Fei used the most direct method to tell Xiao Chun and the other personal disciples what a chosen saint was. Xiao Chun couldn't help but sigh. In response, Xiao Shun's weak voice sounded in his mind. Kid, didn't I tell you before? A chosen saint and a personal disciple are completely different. Do you think this Hu Fei is very strong? What would you think if I told you that he still hasn't used his full strength? Hu Fei had already slaughtered the Wind Ghost group by himself. However, Xiao Shang told Xiao Chen that this still wasn't Hu Fei's true strength. Xiao Chen really didn't know what to think when he heard that. Xiao Chen fell silent while Xiao Sheng chuckled and said, Kid, you still have a long way to go if you want to become a chosen saint. You can only covet the position of a chosen saint when your combat strength reaches the Tao Emperor realm. Xiao Shang's meaning was very clear. To put it bluntly, cultivation wasn't important if one wanted to become a chosen saint, but one's combat strength had to at least reach the Tao Emperor realm. To be honest, if he hadn't personally witnessed how terrifying Hu Fei was, and coupled with the fact that these words were spoken by Xiao Shang, Xiao Chan would have probably thought that someone was bragging. Even though he couldn't see through Hu Fei and Chun Yu's exact cultivations, Xiao Chan was sure that their cultivations had absolutely not attained the Tao Emperor realm. They hadn't even attained the Tao Emperor realm, yet they possessed combat strength comparable to a Tao Emperor realm expert. This wasn't something that could be explained by surmounting a realm to battle. On the heavenly Chun continent, those who could surmount a realm to defeat an enemy could already be considered as geniuses. Moreover, they were only at the level of low-level cultivators. On the other hand, chosen saints were still able to surmount a realm to battle even after attaining the Tao Emperor realm. The gap between them was obvious. Xiao Chun was shocked in his heart. At the same time, the Wind Ghost group was quickly annihilated by Hu Fei to the point they didn't have the ability to fight back. These Wind Ghosts weren't very intelligent, so they instinctively started to retreat when they faced Hu Fei, who they couldn't defeat. When they sensed the retreat of the Wind Ghost group, the morale of the human cultivators naturally soared, and they all started to pursue. One pursued while the other fled, and it could be said that they had a certain advantage. At this moment, Hu Fei didn't continue to attack. Since victory was already decided, Hu Fei's figure flashed over to Chunyu. At this moment, Isu had already arrived by Chunyu's side. Isu was still slightly nervous when facing Hu Fei, so he immediately bowed respectfully and greeted him. Greetings, holy son Hu Fei. Isu was Chunyu's holy servant, so he wasn't unfamiliar with Hu Fei. When he heard Isu, Hu Fei nodded indifferently, and then he looked at Chunyu. The matter is resolved. I'm leaving. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 693. The outcome of the battle had been decided. Now, it was up to the saints and half-sages. Hu Fei and Chunyu were not far behind. Chunyu did not find it strange when he heard Hu Fei's words. He smiled and said, You're leaving already? Don't. We haven't had a good drink yet. It won't be too late to leave after drinking. No need. I still have things to do. Hu Fei replied without giving Chunyu any face. He did not wait for Chunyu's reply and turned to fly toward the transportation array in wind-suppressing city. He left without any hesitation. However, when he flew to the city wall, he glanced at Xiao Chun. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He knew that Xiao Chun was holding back Wu Qi before he noticed. However, Xiao Chun was only a direct disciple. Wu Qi's strength had obviously surpassed the level of a direct disciple. To be more precise, Wu Qi's strength should be between a direct disciple and a chosen. Because of this, Hu Fei was curious that Xiao Chun was able to hold back Wu Qi. Before he left, Hu Fei glanced at Xiao Chun. His intuition told him that the ancient sacred sect would become lively soon. Hu Fei left without saying anything. Of course, he was not the only one who was curious. Chunyu was the same. As for the other direct disciples, they were shocked by Xiao Chen's performance. Of course, they did not know that the previous battle had nothing to do with Xiao Chun. Hu Fei had only borrowed his body. With Xiao Chen's current strength, it was impossible for him to deal with Wu Qi. Not to mention Wu Qi, Hu Fei was not even a match for Yi Tong. Hu Fei left as quickly as he came. There was nothing else for them to do. Chenyu also came to the top of the wall with Yi Su and looked at Xiao Chun. Chenyu said with a smile, "Junior brother Xiao, you really don't show off. You were actually able to fight against Wu Qi. You really opened my eyes." As Chenyu spoke, the direct disciples who had arrived at the top of the wall one after another also locked their gazes on Xiao Chun. Their eyes were all filled with respect. There was no other way. The world of martial artists was like this. Strength was respected, and the strong were respected. Xiao Chen's strength could no longer be regarded as an ordinary direct disciple, because Xiao Chen's strength had exceeded the scope of a direct disciple. Faced with the respectful gazes of the crowd, Xiao Chun said with a smile, "Senior brother Chun, you must be joking. I had no choice just now. I was also not a match for Wu Qi. If Holy Son Hu Fei had not arrived in time, I'm afraid I would have died. Let's not talk about this. Now that the battle has been decided, we just have to wait for those old fellows to deal with the Wind Ghost King and the Wind Ghost Holy King. Then, this battle will come to an end. At that time, I'll look for you for a drink." Chenyu did not linger on the topic after hearing Xiao Chen's words. However, just as Chenyu finished speaking, Isu said indifferently, "You can only drink 3 jars." Chenyu, who was originally in high spirits, immediately lost his temper when he heard Isu's words. There was no need to worry too much about the battle, so everyone was in a good mood. After chatting for a while, Xiao Chun was naturally arranged to enter the city to recuperate because of his serious injuries. After returning to the city, Xiao Chun had nothing to worry about. After all, he had done what he needed to do. As for the battle between saints and semi-saints, it was no longer something he could consider. Not to mention himself, even the 2 holy sons, Chun Yu and Hu Fei, were not qualified to intervene in that level of battle. After sending Xiao Chun back to his residence, a young warrior of the celestial realm came in with a jade bottle in his hands. He had already prepared some healing pills for Xiao Chun. After accepting the healing pill, Xiao Chun no longer paid attention to the outside world and began to focus on recuperating. Now that there was no need to worry about the Wind Ghost attack, it would not be long before the martial law in Wind Suppression City was lifted. At that time, it would be time for Xiao Chun to head to the Wind Plains. Therefore, before that, Xiao Chun had to recuperate. Xiao Chun swallowed the healing pill in the jade bottle in one gulp. The healing pill was a heaven-level upper-grade healing pill, which was specially delivered by Chun Yu. Otherwise, Xiao Chun would not have been able to enjoy it. As soon as the pill entered his stomach, a gentle medicinal power spread through Xiao Chen's limbs and meridians. At the same time, Xiao Chen's wounds began to heal quickly. Closing his eyes and sitting cross-legged, Xiao Chun was recuperating in his residence. Outside the city, the battles between the half-sages and saints had also ended. They naturally knew about the changes in the battle. Now that the Wind Ghost group had fled back to the Wind Plains, the Wind Ghost Kings and Wind Ghost Saint Kings had no intention of continuing the battle. They all chose to retreat. In response, the saints and half-sages did not choose to pursue them. After all, it would be difficult to kill the Wind Ghost Kings and Wind Ghost Saint Kings, even if they did. Since they chose to retreat, it meant that the battle was over. At the end of the battle, cheers erupted outside Wind Suppression City. They had survived the Wind Demon's attack without any mishap. Wind Suppression City was safe and sound, and the next step was to wrap things up, clean up the battlefield, and reward the cultivators who had resisted the Wind Ghost's attack together. The City Lord Mansion of Wind Suppression City clearly had its own procedures for these matters. Therefore, there were many things that did not need to be worried about. They just needed to follow the prescribed procedures. After arranging for people to clean up the battlefield outside the city, St. Kuang Li, St. Qing Ju, and the other saints, as well as Chun Yu, sat in the pavilion in the backyard. After taking a sip of tea, St. Qingju smiled faintly and said, "Chun Yu, I heard that something happened to you this time. Even Hu Fei was attracted by you." The fact that Hu Fei had been here before could not be hidden from the saints. Chun Yu did not deny it. He nodded and said lazily, "He's here." That's right. This time, There are two Saint Bloodwind ghosts with direct lineage. Personal disciples won't be able to stop them. There's no other way. We can only let Hu Fei go. After all, he's a battle maniac. Chun Yu wasn't nervous in the slightest when he was with the five saints. On the contrary, he seemed very relaxed. In the entire younger generation of the ancient saint continent, there were probably only a few saints who could talk so calmly with saints. Hearing Chun Yu's words, Saint Qing Ju's smile did not fade. He continued, "You've worked hard this time. I didn't expect that there would be two direct descendants of the Saint Bloodwind ghost. However, other than Hu Fei, there's another person who must have contributed a lot. To be honest, even us old guys were shocked. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 694. Saint Qingjue took the initiative to speak. Hearing this, everyone knew who Saint Qingjue was talking about. Naturally, it was Xiao Chun. Before Hu Fei arrived, Xiao Chun had blocked Wu Qi. Although he was still defeated in the end, being able to block Wu Qi for so long with his own strength was enough to make people look at him in a new light. Not only did the saints know that Xiao Chun had blocked Wu Qi, it could be said that the news had spread throughout the entire Wind Suppression City. The most noteworthy part of this battle was not the battle between saints and half-saints, because no one saw the battle between saints and half-saints. The most noteworthy part was Xiao Chun and Hu Fei. Hu Fei's strength was admired by everyone, and Xiao Chun was like a hidden dragon that had come out of the abyss, shocking everyone. Hearing Saint Qingjue's words, Saint Kuangli also laughed loudly and said, "That's right, Xiao Chun has really opened our eyes. As a direct disciple, he was actually able to block Wu Qi. It's really unexpected." Saint Kuangli also praised Xiao Chun's performance in this battle. The two saints spoke one after another, and the other three saints nodded slightly in agreement. This Xiao Chun should be a direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. It's said that he has only been a disciple of Tianjin Shengzong for a short 2 years. It's really unexpected that he could make such progress. Yes, this Xiao Chun is only Tianfeng Shengzong's 10th direct disciple, but he was able to block Wu Qi. This strength is probably much stronger than the first direct disciple. Maybe he used some secret method. The saints discussed one after another. They were curious about Xiao Chun, so they deliberately asked about him. As Tianfeng Shengzong's 10th direct disciple, logically speaking, Xiao Chun should not be a match for Wu Qi. After all, even Wang Zong, who was ranked first, would lose more than win against Wu Qi. Because it was somewhat inconceivable, the saints concluded that Xiao Chun might have used some secret method. Of course, the saints did not intend to delve into this. After all, everyone had their own secrets and opportunities. As saints, they naturally would not covet Xiao Chen's opportunities, let alone inquire about Xiao Chen's secrets. After chatting for a while, Saint Qingjue finally said meaningfully, "Xiao Chun is not bad. You can pay attention to him." The meaning of these words of Saint Qingjue was very clear. After this battle, Xiao Chun had successfully entered the eyes of the ancient saint's sect's upper echelons. He could pay attention to it. What should he look at? Naturally, it was to see Xiao Chen's potential. Hearing Saint Qingjue's words, Saint Kuangli and the others all nodded in agreement. Seeing this, Qinyu also revealed a smile on his face. He seemed to have guessed something in his heart. The battle was over, and the cleanup work was carried out in an orderly manner. Without the threat of the wind ghost, the atmosphere in Wind Suppression City was much more relaxed. Of course, there was one thing that everyone was still waiting for, and that was the reward from the ancient saint's sect. After this battle, the reward was naturally indispensable, and this was probably what everyone was most concerned about. After all, according to previous experience, after every attack by the Wind Ghost, warriors who participated in the battle would receive a lot of rewards. Time passed slowly, and in the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. During these 5 days, Xiao Chun did not take a single step out of his small courtyard. After 5 days of recuperation, Xiao Chun's injuries were almost completely healed. Early in the morning, Xiao Chun withdrew from his cultivation. Feeling that his condition had returned to its peak, he opened the door with a smile on his face. His injuries were completely healed, and the next step was to head to the wind plains. Due to the wind ghost attack this time, a lot of time had been delayed. I wonder if the martial law in Wind Suppression City has been lifted. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Chun whispered softly. He still didn't know what the situation outside was like. Just as Xiao Chun finished speaking, a Tianfeng Shengzong disciple ran in quickly and said excitedly, "Senior brother Xiao Chun, Holy Son Chen Yu has come to visit." Chen Yu took the initiative to visit. For a Tianfeng Shengzong disciple, this was simply like a dream. Who was Chen Yu? He was the holy son of the ancient saint sect. No wonder this disciple's face was filled with excitement. Hearing this, Xiao Chun smiled slightly and said, "Senior brother Chen Yu, where is he now?" "He's in the main hall. The elder is receiving him." Hearing this, the disciple replied truthfully. The elder of Tianfeng Shengzong was receiving Chen Yu. Regarding this, Xiao Chun didn't say much and walked towards the main hall. To be received by the elder of the ancient saint sect was already extremely good treatment. However, it was nothing to Chen Yu. Chen Yu was the holy son. In terms of status, he was actually on the same level as the Tianfeng saint. Perhaps only the few saints in the ancient saints sect could suppress Chen Yu. Therefore, even as an elder, when meeting Chen Yu, he was still very respectful. Soon, Xiao Chun strode into the main hall and saw Chen Yu chatting with an elder of Tianfeng Shengzong. This time, Chen Yu was wearing the holy sun robe of the ancient saint sect. His temperament was completely different from before. Although he was still as lazy as before, there was an additional sense of majesty in his laziness. Walking into the main hall with a smile, Xiao Chun smiled and said, "Senior brother Chen Yu, what brings you here?" Xiao Chun was here. Regarding this, the elder of Tianfeng Shengzong secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Receiving the holy sun wasn't an easy task. Although Chen Yu's attitude was very easygoing, the elder didn't dare to relax at all. Every word that he said had to be carefully considered. Now that Xiao Chun was here, he was finally relieved. Therefore, before Chen Yu could speak, the elder stood up and said, "Xiao Chun, you're here. Holy Son Chen Yu is here to see you." Hearing this, Xiao Chun bowed to the elder, then looked at Chen Yu and said, "Senior brother Chen Yu, why don't we have a seat in my small courtyard?" Knowing that the elder was under a lot of pressure by Chen Yu's side, Xiao Chun took the initiative to suggest this. In response, Chen Yu also smiled and said, "Okay, let's go." With that, Xiao Chun, Chen Yu, and Yi Su left the main hall. Only after the three of them left did the elder of Tianfeng Shengzong truly heave a sigh of relief. He sat down on a chair and smiled helplessly. It's better not to receive the holy sun in the future. It's really suffocating. Unaware of the elder's sigh, the three of them went all the way to Xiao Chen's small courtyard. Chen Yu didn't stand on ceremony at all and directly sat down in the pavilion. He said with a lazy smile on his face, "Junior brother Xiao Chun, congratulations this time. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 695. He sat down to congratulate him. Xiao Chun asked in confusion, "Senior brother Chun, you must be joking. What's there to congratulate me about?" After a few interactions, Xiao Chun and Chen Yu had become familiar with each other. Although they weren't close friends, they were extremely casual when they conversed. Unlike the elder from before, Chen Yu didn't feel too much pressure in front of Xiao Chun, so he asked very casually. Chen Yu smiled lazily in response. "Are you really confused or pretending to be confused? Your performance this time was so eye-catching that you've been remembered by all the saints. Saint Qingju even said that he would pay more attention to you in the future. It looks like our junior brother will definitely become the chosen son in the future. I've been noticed by all the saints." Xiao Chun was slightly stunned when he heard that, but he quickly got over it. If he was noticed, then so be it. Moreover, it wasn't a bad thing for Xiao Chun to be noticed by all the saints. Xiao Chun wouldn't be worried because of that. With the attention of the saints, it would definitely be more convenient for Xiao Chun to head to the ancient sacred sect. At the very least, there wouldn't be any trivial troubles. As for whether he could become the chosen son, that would depend on his own strength. Without the strength of a chosen son, let alone the attention of a saint, even if you were the son of a saint, you still wouldn't be able to become the chosen son. That was without a doubt. After all, the chosen son represented the face of the ancient sacred sect. It was impossible to become the chosen son if one only continued to look like one. Upon hearing Chun Yu's words, Xiao Chun smiled and replied, "Senior brother Chun, are you making fun of me? Me becoming the chosen son? That's probably going to take a long time." Chun Yu said that Xiao Chun was definitely going to become the chosen son. Xiao Chun naturally didn't believe such nonsense. Was there anything in the world that was definitely going to happen? Until the very last moment, anything was possible. However, although there were no absolutes in the world, Xiao Chun had absolute confidence in his position as the Holy Son. Firstly, it was because of his own talent. Secondly, it was because of Xiao Sheng. With Xiao Sheng by his side, Xiao Chun and the others would always have a saint to guide them in their cultivation. Moreover, this saint was once the first saint of the Tiana continent. If he still couldn't become a holy son, then he could only blame himself. It was precisely because of his absolute confidence that Xiao Chun revealed his determination to obtain the position of the Holy Son, even though he denied Chun Yu's teasing. Chun Yu naturally sensed Xiao Chun's confidence. With a hearty laugh, he took out a jade bottle from his storage ring and handed 3 talismans to Xiao Chun. This is a reward from the saints. In the jade bottle is a saint-level elixir called the Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir, and the talisman is a black armor talisman. I heard that you're going to the Wind Plane to gain experience. Take these 3 black armor talismans with you. Xiao Chun was very familiar with the black armor talisman, but this was the first time he had seen the Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir. In other words, this was the first time Xiao Chun had come into contact with a saint-level elixir. After all, only a saint-level alchemist could refine a saint-level elixir. Xiao Chun didn't understand the function of the Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir, but it didn't matter because Xiao Sheng's voice sounded in his mind at this time. "Little guy, it seems that the saints of the ancient sacred sect really think highly of you. They actually gave you a Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir. Old ancestor, what's the use of this Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir? What's the use of it? You really don't know what's good for you. This Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir is specially used to cleanse the marrow. It not only strengthens the physical body and meridians, but also cleanses the impurities and residual elixirs in the body. When a warrior cultivates, even if he pays attention to the foundation, he can't avoid taking elixirs. No matter if it's for cultivation or healing, as long as it's an elixir, the residual efficacy will naturally remain in the body. These elixirs have no effect on cultivation, but if you want to become a real expert or a holy son, you must be perfect. This Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir can help you cleanse the impurities in your body, making your body as pure as a newborn baby. Do you understand?" After explaining the function of the Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir to Xiao Chun, Xiao Chun's eyes flashed with a touch of passion. This was really a treasure. After knowing the preciousness of the Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir, it was definitely a priceless item. Of course, Xiao Chun didn't know that the Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir was extremely difficult to refine in the ancient sacred sect, so only saints and holy sons were qualified to take it. This was especially true for the holy sons, like Chun Yu and the others. Every year, they would be rewarded with a Marrow Cleansing Sacred Pill to wash away the impurities and elixir dregs that remained in their bodies during cultivation. You put away the Marrow Cleansing Saint Elixir and the black armor talisman. He had to admit that these rewards were indeed very valuable, and they were all things that Xiao Chun needed right now. It could be seen that Saint Qingjue and the others had put in a lot of effort to reward Xiao Chun. After giving the rewards to Xiao Chun and finishing the business, Chun Yu glanced at Isu beside him. Seeing this, Isu took out some wine and food from her storage ring. Chun Yu said with a smile, "Brother Xiao, the business is over. Shouldn't we have a good drink next?" "I've begged little Isu for a long time for this drink, so this time we can drink to our heart's content. There's no limit, haha," Chun Yu said happily. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Isu reminded him faintly, "Don't forget, you promised me that you won't drink for a year after this meal." This time, in order to make Isu stop drinking, Chinyu had put in a lot of effort. He had paid the price of not drinking for a year in exchange for drinking to his heart's content. Hearing Isu's words, Chinyu's expression instantly became uneasy. He really wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Xiaochen looked at Chinyu's expression, which was as if his parents had died, and laughed involuntarily. Logically speaking, as Isu was Chinyu's holy servant, he should have been obedient to Chinyu. However, the actual situation was the opposite. Isu had Chinyu under his thumb, and Chinyu had no way of dealing with Isu. Xiaochen really did not know what kind of story and relationship there was between the two of them. Xiaochen did not believe that it was just a simple holy servant relationship. Chinyu's face was bitter, but soon he turned his grief and anger into alcohol tolerance. Since he had already agreed, he naturally had to drink until he was dizzy. Otherwise, it would be a loss. Junior brother Xiaochen, come on. Let's have a good drink today. The next time we drink will be a year later. Chinyu took the initiative to raise his wine glass and said with a smile, "Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation." End of chapter. Chapter 696. After they finished talking about business, Chinyu invited Xiaochen to drink. When he thought about how he wouldn't be able to drink this wine for a year, Chinyu obviously relaxed. It felt as if he was going to drink all the wine for this year in one go. Xiaochen did not hate Chinyu in the first place, so he was quite happy drinking. Especially Chinyu, who was so drunk that he passed out in the end. Xiaochen had no choice but to let him rest here. With Chinyu's cultivation, it was naturally impossible for him to get drunk from wine. It could only be said that this guy asked to be drunk and didn't use spirit power to dissolve the alcohol in his body. That was why he was so drunk. However, thinking about how Chinyu wouldn't be able to touch a single drop of wine for the next year, it wasn't strange. After settling Chinyu down, Isu naturally lived with Chinyu. After returning to his room, Xiaochen originally planned to leave for the Wind Plain tomorrow. After all, they had already wasted a lot of time in suppressing Wind City. However, Xiaosheng had a different opinion about Xiaochen's decision. "We've already wasted so much time, there's no hurry. Since the ancient sacred sect has rewarded you with a marrow-cleansing saint pill, you should refine it first. With this marrow-cleansing saint pill, your cultivation should be able to break through to the Dao confirmation realm," Xiaosheng said. The marrow-cleansing saint elixir did not have much effect on making a breakthrough in cultivation, but Xiaochen's cultivation had now reached the entry level of the Tao proving realm. He was only one step away from breaking through to the small success level of the Tao proving realm. As such, the marrow-cleansing saint elixir naturally became that final step. Since it had already come to this point, Xiaosheng wasn't in a hurry. Moreover, after Xiaochen refined the marrow-cleansing saint pill, his strength would definitely increase a lot. It would be easier for him to enter the Wind Plain. Sharpening the axe won't delay the work of cutting firewood. This was what Xiaosheng meant. After hearing Xiaosheng's suggestion, Xiaochen thought for a moment and agreed. He planned to refine the marrow-cleansing saint pill before leaving for the Wind Plain. Thus, Xiaochen wasn't in a hurry. The next day, after Chinyu woke up, the two chatted for a while. Chinyu told Xiaochen that he was leaving suppressing Wind City today. Now that the wind ghost attack had ended, there was no need for Chinyu to continue staying in suppressing Wind City. "Junior Xiaochen, I'm afraid the next time we'll meet in the ancient sacred sect. At that time, we'll have a good drink." Chinyu personally sent Chinyu at the door. After witnessing Xiaochen's strength with his own eyes, Chinyu was confident that Xiaochen would be able to join the ancient sacred sect soon. Xiaochen smiled and nodded in response. Then, Chinyu left with Isu. Chinyu didn't say whether he would go to the ancient sacred sect or somewhere else. Xiaochen didn't ask. After sending Chinyu off, Xiaochen planned to refine the marrow-cleansing saint pill. This was Xiaochen's first time coming into contact with a saint-grade elixir. To be honest, Xiao was looking forward to the effects of the marrow-cleansing saint pill. After all, Xiao had praised the marrow-cleansing saint pill. For Xiao to praise a saint-grade elixir, one could see how heaven-defying the marrow-cleansing saint pill was. Returning to his room, Xiao instructed the disciples of Tian Feng Shengzong that he was going into seclusion and that no one was to disturb him. Then he sat cross-legged on a praying mat in the room. He didn't rush to swallow the marrow-cleansing saint pill. Instead, he adjusted his condition first. Then, Xiao took out the marrow-cleansing saint pill. It was the size of a thumb and golden in color. When Xiao poured the marrow-cleansing saint pill out of the jade bottle, a refreshing pill fragrance quickly spread out. The entire room was filled with the medicinal fragrance of the marrow-cleansing saint pill. Oh, I didn't expect the ancient sacred sect to be so generous. It's actually a marrow-cleansing saint pill with golden veins. Elixirs were not only divided into grades, but also into good and bad. The same type of elixir could be divided into green veins, red veins, and golden veins. Green veins elixir was the worst, while golden veins elixir was the best. Depending on the quality of the elixir, the price of the same elixir would naturally be different. Most intuitively speaking, the price of a single golden pattern pill would be comparable to 3 blue pattern pills at the very least. Originally, the ancient sacred sect had rewarded Xiao with a marrow-cleansing saint pill. This could already be considered a pleasant surprise. He didn't expect the marrow-cleansing saint pill to be at the level of a golden veins elixir. Xiao exclaimed softly. He didn't expect the ancient sacred sect to value Xiao so much. Regarding this, Xiao was also excited. However, he quickly calmed down and swallowed the marrow-cleansing saint pill. After reaching the saint grade, the marrow-cleansing saint pill's medicinal effect was naturally extremely powerful. However, under the premise of having a huge amount of energy, the medicinal effect of the marrow-cleansing saint pill was very gentle. It wouldn't harm the body of the person who consumed it. As soon as the marrow-cleansing saint pill entered his stomach, a warm current quickly flowed through Xiao limbs and veins. He could clearly feel that this gentle power was like a scalpel, constantly penetrating into his bone marrow, skin, meridians, and muscles, removing the remaining impurities in his body inch by inch. The most important function of the marrow-cleansing saint pill was to cleanse the marrow. However, during this entire process, Xiao didn't feel the slightest pain. On the contrary, he felt very comfortable. At the same time, during the process of cleansing the marrow, the spiritual energy in Xiao body also began to break through to the initial Tao validation realm with the help of the marrow-cleansing saint pill. It had been 2 years since he joined the Tian Feng Shengzong. During these 2 years, Xiao cultivation had not broken through. His purpose was to lay a good foundation and eliminate the side effects of the Tao formation. During these 2 years, Xiao hadn't broken through, but his foundation was already very solid. At this time, with the help of the marrow-cleansing saint pill, it could be said that Xiao foundation was much stronger than before. It was a completely natural breakthrough, and Xiao didn't need to do anything. As the marrow-cleansing saint pill continued to cleanse the impurities in his body, Xiao cultivation naturally broke through to the initial Tao validation realm. Without the slightest hindrance, the barrier to the initial Tao validation realm was broken through. At the same time, layers of black impurities were constantly forced out of Xiao skin and pores. When these impurities appeared, a stench suddenly spread out. However, Xiao didn't care about it all, because at this time, Xiao could clearly feel the changes in his body. It was as if some kind of shackle had been unlocked. With the help of the marrow-cleansing saint pill, Xiao only felt that his whole body seemed to have relaxed a lot in an instant. This feeling was similar to when you were carrying a huge backpack and were panting from exhaustion. Suddenly, you dropped the heavy backpack. Please add it to your collection. Monthly vote. Recommended. In a chapter. Chapter 697. he felt much more relaxed. He had to admit that the marrow-cleansing Saint Elixir was worthy of being a divine-grade elixir. Its effect was immediate and it was of great help to him. However, in the entire Ancient Saint state, only the Ancient Saint sect had a Saint-grade alchemist who could refine God-grade elixirs. As the marrow-cleansing Saint Elixir was extremely difficult to refine and the heavenly treasures required to refine it were very expensive, only the Holy Son was qualified to consume it. It could be said that he had successfully experienced what it was like to be a Holy Son. It took Xiao Chun 2 days to completely digest the medicinal effect of the marrow-cleansing Saint Pill. At the same time, his cultivation base of the Minor Success Tau realm had also been completely stabilized during these 2 days. He didn't know if it was because of the marrow-cleansing Saint Elixir, but when he broke through to the Minor Success Tau validation realm this time, he didn't have the same aura as before. On the contrary, as soon as he broke through, Xiao Chen's aura was very dense, not like a person who had just broken through. Of course, the marrow-cleansing Saint Elixir's effect was one of the reasons. However, Xiao Chen had also stayed in the Tao validation realm for 2 years. His foundation could be said to be incomparably solid. With the combination of the two, Xiao Chen was able to stabilize the realm he had just broken through in such a short time. Xiao Chen's cultivation base was completely stabilized, and the medicinal effect of the marrow-cleansing Saint Elixir was successfully refined. He took a comfortable bath. After the marrow cleansing by the marrow-cleansing Saint Elixir, Xiao Chen felt much more energetic. After resting for another night in Suppressing Wind City, early the next morning, Xiao Chen was ready to set off for the Wind Plains. He had delayed for another 3 days in order to refine the marrow-cleansing Saint Elixir. After 3 days, Suppressing Wind City had returned to normal. The martial law in the city had also been lifted. At the same time, the disciples and warriors of the major sects had also left one after another. In the small courtyard where Xiao Chen lived, the disciples of Tian Feng Shengzong had basically all returned. Only a few ordinary disciples were still there. After bidding farewell to the few people, Xiao Chen set off for the Wind Plains. This time, when he arrived at the city gate, no one stopped Xiao Chen and he smoothly left the city. After leaving Suppressing Wind City, they would be able to enter the outer regions of the Wind Plains after another 50 to 60 li. They were not in a hurry, and along the way, Xiao Chen also saw other people heading towards the Wind Plains. Although the Wind Plains was one of the 4 great deathlands of the Tiana continent, it still contained many opportunities. Therefore, although there were not many people who went to explore the Wind Plains, it was definitely not impossible. However, under normal circumstances, most people who enter the Wind Plains would choose to travel in groups. Unless they were extremely powerful, very few people would choose to travel alone. Generally speaking, the dangers of the Wind Plain mainly came from 2 aspects. The first was the strong winds that constantly attacked the Wind Plain. This was also the reason why the Wind Plain was so dangerous. Without the Black Armor Talisman, it was simply impossible for human warriors to enter the Wind Plains. Apart from these fierce gales, the second danger was naturally the Wind Ghost. Xiao Chen had a total of 6 Black Armor Talismans. Originally, the Heavenly Wind Saint had given him 3, and then the Ancient Sacred Sect had rewarded him with another 3. 6 Black Armor Talismans, if nothing unexpected happened, should be enough. Moreover, apart from the 6 Black Armor Talismans, Xiao Chen also had many defensive soul treasures. These soul treasures could also play a role in resisting the strong gales of the Wind Plains. Of course, this was only the outer regions. Once Xiao Chen entered the depths of the Wind Plains, he would still have to rely on the Black Armor Talismans. Along the way, the distance of 50 to 60 li was not too far for Xiao Chen. Soon, Xiao Chen could see the outer regions of the Wind Plains. It was as if the Wind Plains were shrouded in a barrier. Very abruptly, a wind wall separated the Wind Plains from the outside world. As he got closer and closer to the Wind Plains, Xiao Chen could also see that there were several small groups that were heading towards the Wind Plains to train. These small groups might be disciples of the same sect, or they might be rogue cultivators who knew each other. They had set up camp in the outer regions of the Wind Plains, preparing to enter the Wind Plains. Compared to these small groups, Xiao Chun naturally did not have to go through so much trouble. After taking out his defensive soul treasure and activating it, Xiao Chun directly entered the Wind Plains. In the outer regions of the Wind Plains, there was no need to use the black armor talismans. Relying on defensive soul treasures was enough. This was what Xiao Sheng had told Xiao Chun. After all, with 6 black armor talismans, it was a lot to start with, but he still had to be prepared for any accidents. After passing through the wind wall, Xiao Chun was considered to have successfully entered the Wind Plains. For a moment, the sound of the wind constantly entered his ears, and he could clearly feel that the wind was like a sharp blade blowing past his body. It was incomparably terrifying. In the entire Tiana continent, only the Wind Ghost clan could live without restrictions in the Wind Plains. Other clans, whether it was human or demonic beasts, had to rely on treasures or talismans to withstand the fierce winds of the Wind Plains. Of course, when one reached the Sage Realm, they could rely on their own strength to withstand the strong winds of the Wind Plains. However, this was not a long-term solution. After all, there would come a time when they would be exhausted. He looked around and saw that there was not even a blade of grass in sight. The only thing that could be seen was the terrifying gale that blew past all year round. Because the Wind Plains was shrouded in terrifying gales all year round, the Wind Plains was extremely desolate. The ground was bare. Not to mention trees, there was not even a single blade of grass. Thinking about it, even a semi-sage expert would find it difficult to withstand the fierce winds. How could the trees and weeds survive? This time, the purpose of going to the Wind Plains was to find the Heavenly Spirit Lake. Therefore, Xiao Chun naturally had to ask Xiao Sheng, "Ancestor, where are we going now?" The Wind Plains was vast and boundless. If one did not have a precise direction, it would be extremely difficult to find the Heavenly Spirit Lake. Faced with Xiao Chen's inquiry, Xiao Sheng directly replied, "East. Go deep into the heart of the Wind Plains." The Heavenly Spirit Lake was not in the periphery of the Wind Plains. Instead, it was in the central region. Hearing this, Xiao Chun did not hesitate and rushed towards the east. Originally, Xiao Chun planned to fly in the air. However, after trying it once, he instantly gave up. In the Wind Plains, the stronger the wind, the stronger it was. In other words, although flying was not prohibited in the Wind Plains, no one would be foolish enough to fly in the Wind Plains. This was because the wind in the sky was many times stronger than on land. Even with the black armor talisman, it was difficult to withstand it. Since he could not fly in the air, he naturally could only choose to walk. He walked all the way towards the east. The fierce winds in the Wind Plains covered the sky, and there was no day or night. Therefore, the concept of time in the Wind Plains was extremely vague. Xiao Chun did not know how long he had been walking, but his surroundings, which had always remained the same, suddenly changed. In front of Xiao Chun, an extremely ordinary weed was swaying in the wind, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 698. In this wind plain that was shrouded in fierce winds, there was actually a wild grass. Moreover, this wild grass did not suffer the slightest damage under the blowing of the wind and was still firmly growing on the ground. This scene obviously aroused Xiao Chen's curiosity. What a joke! The wind in the wind plain was something that even warriors could not withstand. How could a mere wild grass survive in such a windy wind plain? If it had been an ordinary tree, or even a large mountain, it would have been ground to dust by the strong winds of the wind plains. However, this weed had survived. While Xiao Chun was curious, at the same time, Xiao Sheng's voice also sounded in his mind. "Hey, this is the grass of intent. Boy, this is a good thing." Xiao Chun did not know what the grass of intent was, but soon, Xiao Sheng opened his mouth to explain. The grass of intent was a very precious treasure. There were not many of them, but any warrior would be incomparably jealous of the grass of intent. Not for anything else, but Because the grass of intent could help a warrior cultivate the power of concept. Whether it was sword intent, saber intent, or spear intent, the grass of intent could help a warrior cultivate the power of concept. After listening to Xiao Sheng's explanation, Xiao Qin's eyes flashed with a touch of fiery color. How difficult it was to break through the power of concept. Xiao Qin had personally experienced this. Since he comprehended sword intent, Xiao Qin's sword intent had only reached the small success stage. This showed how difficult it was to break through the power of concept. After explaining the function of the grass of intent in detail to Xiao Qin, Xiao Sheng also opened his mouth and sighed. I didn't expect that there would be grass of intent here. Boy, quickly collect this grass of intent. The grass of intent was precious, and it only appeared in places with extremely harsh environments. In the entire Sky River continent, there were only 4 places where the grass of intent had appeared, and these 4 places were the 4 great deadlands of the Sky River continent. If one were to ask where the harshest environment was in the Sky River continent, it would undoubtedly be the 4 great deadlands. And these 4 great deadlands were also the best growing environment for the meaning grass. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Xiao Qin naturally did not hesitate. He strode to the front of the herb of will. It looked no different from a weed, but when Xiao Qin approached the herb of will, he could clearly feel that a wave of artistic conception was constantly emitted from the herb of will. The power of concept was very mysterious and difficult to explain. However, the power of concept emitted from the herb of will did not depend on the slightest attribute. Because of this, no matter what kind of power of concept a martial artist comprehended, they could use the herb of will to cultivate. A smile appeared on his face. Without any hesitation, Xiao Qin pulled out the elemental herb. Just as Xiao Qin held the elemental herb in his hand, a cold shout suddenly sounded. Boy, this elemental herb is mine. Put it down and get lost. The voice was very arrogant. Hearing this, Xiao Qin turned his head and saw 6 human martial artists striding out of the wind. The person in the lead was a pale-faced but very arrogant young man. In the wind plane, the perception of human martial artists would be greatly reduced. This was also because of the strong winds in the wind plane. Therefore, Xiao Qin did not discover the existence of these people from the beginning to the end. Looking at the few people striding in front of him, Xiao Qin's eyes swept across the 6 people and finally fixed on the young man in the lead. Great perfection, Dao, querying realm. This young man's cultivation was obviously not in Xiao Qin's eyes. However, looking at his appearance, he should be a disciple of a big family. Facing Xiao Qin's gaze, the young man did not care at all. His eyes were fixed on the elemental herb in Xiao Qin's hand from the beginning to the end. There was a touch of unconcealable passion in his eyes. The elemental herb, he did not expect to be lucky enough to obtain an elemental herb in this experiential learning in the wind plane. It should be known that the elemental herb was very precious. Moreover, with the continuous stream of people entering the wind plane for experiential learning, the elemental herb in the periphery of the wind plane was basically extinct. Now that he was able to encounter one, it could be said that his luck was off the charts. In his heart, he had already regarded this elemental herb as his own. As for Xiao Qin, the young man did not care at all. The young man's name was Tang Tianbao. He was the young master of the Tang family, one of the 3 big families in the wind-suppressing city. The Tang family was very powerful in the wind-suppressing city. Moreover, the Tang family and the city lord's office of the wind-suppressing city had always been on good terms. Therefore, in the wind-suppressing city, very few people would provoke the Tang family. Even the disciples of the big holy sects would not be too presumptuous when facing the Tang family. It was precisely because of the status of the Tang family in the wind-suppressing city that Tang Tianbao's character was arrogant and domineering. This time, because the wind ghost attack had just ended, Tang Tianbao's father, who was the current master of the Tang family, felt that the danger in the wind plane was greatly reduced. Therefore, he arranged for Tang Tianbao to enter the wind plane for experiential learning. Originally, Tang Tianbao had already been experiential learning in the wind plane for several days, but he did not gain much. Now that he saw this elemental herb, how could he not be excited? Previously, Tang Tianbao had sized up Xiao Chun. Seeing that Xiao Chun was not wearing any holy sect disciple's uniform, Tang Tianbao did not have the slightest concern in his heart. He only regarded Xiao Chun as a rogue cultivator who was relatively lucky. His gaze was fixed on the elemental herb for a long time. Finally, Tang Tianbao's gaze finally moved up and fell on Xiao Chun. His expression was incomparably arrogant as he said, "You can get lost in the direction of the elemental herb." Hearing Tang Tianbao's words, Xiao Chun smiled coldly and said, "I found this elemental herb first. Everything should be first come, first served, right?" All the way from the Tianshan continent, Xiao Chun was no longer a little kid who did not know anything. Although he was still very young, Xiao Chun could be said to be completely experienced. Therefore, Xiao Chun was very clear about what Tang Tianbao was thinking. It was nothing more than wanting to snatch the elemental herb by force. However, Tang Tianbao's thinking was too simple. Since it had already fallen into his hands, how could Xiao Chun obediently hand over the elemental herb? Moreover, although Tang Tianbao's side had 6 people, Tang Tianbao's cultivation was only at the great completion of the Dao querying realm. In Xiao Chen's eyes, he was no different from an ant. As for the other 5 people, 4 of them were at the great completion of the Dao querying realm, and 1 was at the great completion of the Dao querying realm. This kind of strength was not considered invincible to Xiao Chun. Therefore, Xiao Chun naturally would not hand over the elemental herb. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, a murderous intent suddenly flashed in Tang Tianbao's eyes. He said in a cold tone, "Not handing it over? Kid, are you looking for death? This is the wind plane. Even if you die, no one will know." Tang Tianbao's words were filled with a strong sense of threat. Hearing this, Xiao Chun smiled indifferently and said, "That's right. This is the wind plane. No one will know even if I die. So, are you sure you want to snatch it?" Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. In a chapter. Chapter 699. Tang family was one of the 3 major families of suppressing Wind City. Ordinary warriors couldn't afford to provoke Tang family. However, it didn't have much effect on Xiao Chun. It was impossible for Xiao Chun to be afraid of them. It had been almost 10 years since Xiao Chun had come to the Tiana continent. He had started off as an outsider with no foundation. Now he had gradually grown up and had his own supporters in the Tiana continent and the ancient holy state. The strongest person in Tang family was only a semi-sage. Even if they had more than one semi-sage, what was Tang family compared to Tianfeng Shengzong? Xiao Chun was the direct disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong. Naturally, he wouldn't be afraid of Tang family. Even without mentioning Tianfeng Shengzong, Xiao Chun had already attracted the attention of some big figures in the ancient sacred sect. So, would Tang family dare to touch Xiao Chun? With a background that completely crushed Tang family, Xiao Chun didn't care about Tang Tianbao's threat at all. Of course, Tang Tianbao naturally didn't know Xiao Chun's identity. Otherwise, how could he provoke Xiao Chun? After all, he was an idiot. Tang Tianbao had no intention to have any conflict with Tang Tianbao. However, after hearing Xiao Chun's words, Tang Tianbao was burning with anger. This guy actually dared to threaten him. The expression on his face became more and more gloomy. In this regard, Xiao Chun didn't care and said indifferently, "I have no intention to fight with you. However, I found this herb of intent first. It should be mine." He had no intention to fight with Tang Tianbao. Of course, it was obviously impossible to hand over the herb of intent. After saying that, Xiao Chun put the herb of intent into his storage ring, then turned around and prepared to leave. Xiao Chun naturally wouldn't take such a trivial matter to heart. It was also impossible for him to find trouble with Tang family afterwards. Just as he was about to leave, Tang Tianbao angrily shouted, "Want to leave? Dream on. Kill this brat for me." He was completely furious. Hearing this, Xiao Chun, who had already turned around, sighed helplessly. He didn't want to offend Tang family. It wasn't because he was afraid, but because it was troublesome. However, Tang Tianbao was courting death. There was no other way. Xiao Chun had repeatedly made concessions, but Tang Tianbao still recklessly chose to attack. After hearing Tang Tianbao's words, the 5 Tang family guards behind him. These 5 guards were not the guards of Tang Mansion, but Tang Tianbao's personal guards. It could be said that they were Tang Tianbao's confidants. They usually followed Tang Tianbao and showed off their strength. Now that they heard Tang Tianbao's words, they naturally obeyed. The 5 guards attacked. The guard with the cultivation base of Dao Confirmation Realm sneered. "Brat, you really don't know what's good for you. My young master intended to spare your life, but you don't know what's good for you. I'm sorry. Remember, be smart in your next life. Don't offend people you can't afford to offend." The guard leader looked like a lackey. Hearing his words, Xiao Chun sighed softly and said, "Yes, be smart in your next life. Don't offend people you can't afford to offend." Xiao Chun repeated the guard leader's words. Obviously, these people didn't understand the meaning of Xiao Chun's words. They thought that Xiao Chun had admitted defeat. However, before they could rejoice, Xiao Chun's storage ring flashed. The ink dragon sword instantly appeared in his hand. He slashed at one of the guards. The square sky sword shadow was directly displayed. The sword light that filled the sky immediately tore the guard into pieces. Although the cultivation base of these 5 guards was higher than Xiao Chun's, in terms of combat strength, how could they compare to Xiao Chun? Xiao Chun was now a Dao Confirmation Realm expert. But it was no exaggeration to say that Xiao Chun was already an invincible existence in the Dao Confirmation Realm. Facing these ordinary Dao Confirmation Realm cultivators, it was as easy as chopping vegetables. He killed a guard with a single slash. Seeing this, the other 4 guards were stunned. None of them thought that Xiao Chun would dare to take the initiative to kill. However, Xiao Chun obviously didn't give them much time to think. After killing one of them with a single slash, Xiao Chun didn't stop. He took a step forward and attacked another guard. It was still a single slash. The sharp sword intent didn't give the guard any time to react. He was killed by Xiao Chun with a single slash. After killing another guard, everyone started to panic. However, it was obviously too late. It didn't take too much effort, except for the guard leader, who was at the perfect Dao Confirmation Realm, who wasted some energy. The rest were all killed by Xiao Chun with a single slash. In less than 100 breaths, Tang Tianbao's 5 guards were all killed by Xiao Chun. Tang Tianbao was scared out of his wits when he saw this scene. Tang Tianbao's expression changed drastically. Seeing Xiao Chun turn around, Tang Tianbao kept retreating. His eyes were filled with horror. "What are you doing? I'm the young master of the Tang family. If you kill me, the Tang family won't let you go." He didn't expect Xiao Chun to be so strong. The 5 guards were killed in an instant. Tang Tianbao, who was completely terrified, didn't have the slightest thought of fighting with Xiao Chun. He could only threaten Xiao Chun with his identity. However, Tang Tianbao was obviously stupid again. Since he dared to kill, why would Xiao Chun care about Tang Tianbao's identity? Although Xiao Chun was slightly stunned when Tang Tianbao said that he was the young master of the Tang family, he quickly returned to normal. "The young master of the Tang family? I'm sorry, but this identity isn't enough to let you live," Xiao Chun said indifferently as he walked up to Tang Tianbao. Without any hesitation, Xiao Chun sent Tang Tianbao's head flying with his sword. After killing Tang Tianbao, Xiao Chun searched through everyone's storage rings. He didn't find anything good. The only thing he found was a black armor talisman on Tang Tianbao's body. Xiao Chun was naturally satisfied and kept it. To Xiao Chun, Tang Tianbao was just a small interlude. So what if he killed him? He continued on his journey. While Xiao Chun continued to explore the core area of the Wind Plains, in a wind ghost village in the Wind Plains, a Saint Bloodwind ghost said coldly, "These humans deserve to die. They actually dared to enter the Wind Plains on such a large scale. Do they think that the Wind Plains will be safe after the Wind Ghost attack?" The Saint Bloodwind ghost said coldly, "If Xiao Chun was here, he would definitely recognize this Saint Bloodwine ghost because he was one of the Saint Bloodwind ghosts that followed Liu Tianming to attack the Wind Suppression City. At that time, he seemed to have fought with Liu Tianming, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.